Story. Imperial Galactic Army officer Alan Corinth's ship is seriously damaged after being ambushed by an unknown foe in hyperspace. Even though it was through sheer coincidence, he became the sole survivor. The stricken ship fell to the planet below. Alan alone managed to get to an escape pod. Alan, the Imperial Army officer, wagers his survival in this savage world on the symbiotic nanomachines in his body. The world he landed on was home to a prosperous human civilization, which seemed to have a strangely similar genetic pedigree to himself. In this puzzling fantasy world of swords and sorcery, Alan will live to the fullest alongside his comrades. What will Alan achieve in this strange world? A science fiction fantasy in a Middle Ages setting starts here. The first encounter between humanity and the intelligent life forms known as bugs occurred in the year 1254 of the Imperial calendar, on the planet Vesta, within the Arturo star system. Vesta was a sleepy backwater colonial planet with agriculture as its main industry. It had a population not exceeding 200,000 citizens, no stationed military force, and only had minimal defense facilities installed. When the bugs warped out into the system with a fleet of 16 warships, they bombarded major cities from satellite orbit, crippled all their infrastructure, and begun their descent with scores of landing craft. The colonists, who did not have weapons to defend themselves, were easily routed, and all 200,000 of them were killed without exception, be it man, woman, or child. What made things worse was that the bugs had a penchant for cruelty and enjoyed feasting on human flesh. 10 days later, the Second Fleet of the Imperial Galactic Navy rushed toward the Arturo star system in response to the FTL communications transmitting distress calls from Vesta, destroyed the bugs' fleet there and wiped out all bugs which landed on the planet. Unfortunately, however, there were no survivors. The soldiers of the Imperial Army who landed on planet Vesta were horrified by the images, which were recorded by various security cameras installed on facilities throughout the planet. Those images were truly visions of hell. Ever since then, humanity and bugs have been locked in a never-ending war for thousands of years. It was now the year 2258 IC, and the human Imperial Galactic Navy warship named Iris Conrad has been engaged in a long-term exploration and reconnaissance mission for more than 2 years ever since its departure from port. Its sole mission was the fulfillment of the dearest wish of the human race, finding the mother planet of humanity's enemy, the bugs. They were now currently engaged in traveling through hyperspace, only warping out at set intervals in order to search and map the surrounding space. It was a simple yet seemingly endless mission. Imperial Galactic Navy Lieutenant Alan Corinth was currently in the middle of replacing processor modules within the mainframe clean room, the heart of the Iris Conrad battleship. It was maintenance work that stemmed from an FTL communication a few days ago, stating that the processor modules aboard the ship may possibly be malfunctioning. Iris, the ship's AI, was monitoring the lieutenant's maintenance work. During hyperspace navigation, most of the crew were placed in cryosleep as there were few tasks to be worked on. If Iris was human, she would probably complain about having too much time on her hands. Under these circumstances, Iris' main programming dictates that she devote the time to observe humanity and understand human psychology. Alan Corinth, Imperial Galactic Navy First Lieutenant. Assigned to the battleship Iris Conrad as an intelligence officer of the 1st Platoon. Age, 25. Hails from the Trader star system, planet Lancel. After compulsory education, he graduated from the Imperial Space Academy as part of the 1032nd class. Served for 3 years aboard the Star-class heavy cruiser. Transferred to the recently commissioned Galactic-class battleship as part of a newly formed unit. In service for 2 years. He has a height of 175 centimeters and a weight of 70 kilograms. Has a slim but firm build that befits a soldier of the Imperial Army. Of Caucasian descent, which makes up 50% of the human race, with blonde hair and gray eyes. Sports a refreshing face. The refreshing face, judgment, was the result of a face evaluation application developed by Iris, and her evaluation ranks him above average. The face evaluation application was secretly developed by Iris for the purpose of researching human behavior, and when it was anonymously released to the public, it spread quickly and received universal acclaim due to its accurate results. The system's evaluation rated the lieutenant's work as mindful and reliable. Absolutely no wasted actions. The system's comprehensive evaluation was, which was one of the highest ratings on board the ship. It was a shame that someone like him remains a mere lieutenant. 2. Is this really okay, Miss Conrad? To assign someone like me to a place like this? I think that in the case of a battleship, it isn't proper for an officer who isn't at least a major to be here. I asked the ship's AI, who was monitoring the work I was doing. Her name was the same as this ship's, Iris Conrad. In accordance with convention, the AI of a battleship is given the honorary rank of captain, and a mere lieutenant like me had to watch how I speak around her. I'm not a regular Navy staff officer, but am instead a member of the Galactic Army unit assigned to this ship as an intelligence officer. So it's kind of hard to believe that I was allowed to be in this room. I guess Major Amat was certainly qualified to do this job. But he's a hulking man. Standing nearly 2 meters tall and would have had trouble fitting himself and working in the cramped space of the clean room. After all, the work involved crawling inside spaces barely 1 meter wide and replacing the designated processor modules within. The female officer on the virtual display was of course not a real human, but the ship's AI, which was imitating the officer who the ship was named after. The female officer was a celebrated hero in the Tau Vegas 2-star system 10 years prior. In order to buy time for 20,000 colonists to escape under the attack of multiple bug fleets, she helmed a single heavy cruiser to engage them. In the end, she fought them in close quarters combat, doggedly stalled them and managed to blow herself up in the end even in the midst of being wantonly devoured by the brutal creatures, and became the Empire's hero as a result. In the Imperial Galactic Navy, there is a custom of naming ships after officers who achieved heroic feats, and that was how the battleship Iris Conrad got its name, as well as the AI Iris Conrad, which imitated the late Brigadier General. I see, understood. I'll be done after replacing one more. By the way, what are we gonna do with all the defective processor modules after replacing them? Well, I was thinking it would be better if we found some other use for them instead of just disposing of them. No. There's definitely some use for them. To be honest, it's for my own research theme. During long periods of hyperspace navigation, technical and intelligence officers, not in cryosleep, were required to do some research. They weren't expected to go at it like real researchers, but were instead tasked as such in order to train their skills further and keep them sharp. The value of one processor module was greater than my annual income. There's no way I can't find any other use for it. My research theme is titled Virtual Reality in a Standalone Environment. The contents are literally technical considerations regarding realizing VR in a standalone environment not connected to any network. In system simulations, it's already reached a stage where it could be put to practical use. The research paper also assumes the use of a processor module like this one. I read through your research topic, but I don't quite understand its meaning. Why are you so fixated on a standalone environment and not just simply use the mainframe? I will be blunt with you. I can't think of any reason other than using virtual reality for some shameful purpose. That's a misunderstanding. That's not it, Captain. It's only humanity's arrogance which allows them to believe that they can always access the mainframe at any time. We have to develop a means to utilize VR even in emergency situations where access to the mainframe is cut off. I became flustered because she managed to guess the main purpose of my research straight away. Iris is sharp as always. Thank you very much, Captain. The outcome of my research depends on one of those processes. Okay. That wraps up the module replacement. I've managed to replace all 64 modules. The instant I tried to exit the maintenance shaft of the cleanroom, the walls suddenly collapsed on me. I responded to these loud calls and came to. No, I'm awake. I let out a confused reply while still unsure about the situation. It was then that I noticed that I was covered in blood. It's already dried onto my skin. Furthermore, I was floating in zero gravity. What? What is this? Just what the heck happened? It seems my head injuries have already been taken care of by Nanum. Nanum is the term used for military-use nanomachines, and all Imperial Galactic Navy soldiers have these symbiotic nanomachines within their bodies. These extremely tiny machines cannot be seen with the naked eye and require an electron microscope to view. It's a machine formed by at least 100 billion individual units. It has multiple features including AI, vital sign monitoring, medical and repair functions, sense enhancement, short-range communication capability and more. These nanomachines can't be replenished by a normal human diet, so special rare metals have to be ingested instead. We were attacked during hyperspace navigation. The nature of the attack is unknown. In the first place, the ship isn't supposed to be in a perceivable physical form when traveling through hyperspace. I can't imagine how the attack got through in these circumstances. Is it the bugs? No, that's impossible. The bugs do not possess the level of technology to pull off such a thing. In any case, the ship has suffered critical damage from that attack. We've been warped out of hyperspace and navigation is currently impossible. And that's not all. We were attacked from 4 different coordinates. Furthermore, the bridge, engine section, first and second cryosleep bays, communication room, gravity control room, and hangar have all been destroyed. I was stunned, speechless. What Iris was saying was unimaginable. It's been more than 100 years since a Galaxy-class battleship has suffered losses as grave as these. Both cryosleep bays were destroyed. Then what about the rest of the crew? What of my unit? Are there any survivors? Even though they were in the middle of hyperspace navigation, about 50 of the 1,200 crew members should have been awake. Does this mean all of them were dead? That can't be. So the ship captain, first mate, commander and everyone in my platoon are. Yes. The crew members who were in sections not directly hit by the attacks were almost instantly killed during the ensuing impact after the forced warp out due to the failure of the gravity controls. Since the clean room is the most vital part of the ship, it's equipped with an independent gravity dampening module. So the shock was mitigated and Lieutenant managed to survive. I see. It's only because I was inside this room that I didn't get injuries worse than these. If I was outside, I would have been smashed straight into the walls with tremendous momentum. I crawled out of the maintenance shaft. But that's just. In this vast universe, the probability of us coming out of hyperspace and randomly arriving right above a planet was supposed to be virtually next to nil. I noticed Iris had begun speaking in a more polite manner. Then, shouldn't we do just that? But the captain's now. Are you serious? The captain of a Galaxy-class battleship needs to be at least of the rank of Commodore. A first lieutenant in the army shouldn't have any qualifications whatsoever to assume captaincy. But even so, I'm the only one who remained alive. Guess it's something inevitable. It's just a formality done in order to issue orders. On the surface, senior officers' education is done in order for aspiring senior officers to learn the code of conduct expected of them, but the actual purpose was brainwashing in order to prevent them from taking actions contrary to the regulations stated in the military codex. This isn't formally recognized by the armed forces, but everyone in the military knows this is the case. It was a policy implemented as a result of a harshly learned lesson in ancient times, when a world with billions of people living in it was destroyed by a single madman. Even though it was called education, what actually took place was brainwashing through the use of nanoms and biological patches directly targeting the mind. One usually loses consciousness due to the enormous amounts of information being directly fed into one's brain during the process. We're running out of time. What should I do? A biological patch popped out from within the console. I attached it to my forehead, took a seat and leaned back. After a clicking sound came from the patch, I lost consciousness once more. I woke up from Iris calls. I felt a sense of déjà vu. Just how long have I been unconscious? Got it. All right then, let's get started. I'm now the acting captain of this vessel. Please acknowledge. By the powers vested in me as a commanding officer, I hereby declare a first-grade emergency. Furthermore, I order the battleship Iris Conrad to take all necessary measures in order to preserve the fighting strength of this ship and the Navy's honor. That is your captain's orders. This takes maximum priority above anything else. It was my first time issuing such cool-sounding commands like those. No, it's my first time hearing them as well. Things really are different after taking senior officers. Education. I should note that I was just reading off the words Iris displayed on the virtual window provided by the Nanom interface like a teleprompter. The commands issued by the captain and senior officers back then really were cool. As expected of senior officers, but I'm sure as heck they also read off prompts. All right. Now we can start repairs on the ship. Huh? What are you talking about? Just as she said, it does kinda feel stuffy and hard to breathe in here. But even if you tell me to escape, is the atmosphere on that planet even breathable? What's up with the remaining 7%? Even so, an escape pod. How about using a landing craft? Then I wouldn't be able to go back to the ship after I escape. What? I didn't think the probability would be that low. I understand. What about food and weapons? I activated my nanoms and checked out the supplies inside the escape pod. I was taken aback when I read what was displayed on the virtual window. M151 pulse rifle. A 18p laser gun. Electromagnetic blade knife. 42 packs of emergency rations. 28 liters of water. 1 bottle of rare metals. 2 blankets. To be honest, for a soldier like myself, these weapons were quite unsatisfactory. Their firepower left much to be desired. And there's nowhere near enough food and water. But even if I say all that, there's no way I'd find any better options here. Is there anything else I can bring with me? Why not bring one of the processor modules you just replaced with you, Captain? They are made of rare metals. Now that she mentioned it, that's right. I'd have to break them down first before I could consume them, but I think I'll manage somehow. Rare metals are the raw materials for nanoms. It may be possible to procure them locally, but I don't want to go through the trouble of searching for them. Nanoms are lifelines for soldiers like me. As long as you had rare metals on hand, you'd be just fine. The boarding area for the escape pods was directly next to the entrance of this room. I'm truly grateful to the guy who thought about equipping this room with its own escape pod. I asked Iris to open the escape pod hatch and loaded the processor module inside. The escape pod could house 5 people and thus had 5 seats. The interior was quite large. That's right. I also need uniforms. It's an underdeveloped planet, after all. You can never have too much to wear. Right now, I was wearing work overalls for working inside the clean room. I loaded the uniform I changed out of before I started work inside this place. Are there any other things? Nope. Come to think of it, this was inside the computer mainframe. There's no way daily necessities would be in a place like this. I'm all set. I obediently boarded the pod, sat on one of the seats and fixed my seatbelt. Yeah. You too, Miss Conrad. The escape pod was then ejected towards the planet. Bugs. Intelligent life forms resembling large insects and various types have been confirmed. The most common type looks like a cockroach walking upright on its hind legs. It's covered in body hair and a hard outer shell. This should be enough to disgust most humans, but on top of these, it's also extremely filthy and covered with fleshy outgrowths and parasites inside and outside its body. It's quite brutal and sports a much higher combat ability compared to humans. Engaging it in close quarters combat was an exercise in futility. But during the past 1,000 years of war, humanity has worked hard to bridge the gap, and presently, it's now possible for Galactic Navy soldiers to match them in hand-to-hand combat. The bugs also possess technology, which gives them hyperspace navigation capabilities, but the Empire is slightly ahead on that front. The most fearsome thing about the bugs is their sheer numbers. Colonized planets targeted by bugs will be swarmed by seemingly endless numbers of bug fleets. According to studies done by experts, the ratio of humans to bugs is about 1 to 6. However, there doesn't seem to be any specialized reproduction facilities inside the bug colonies that have been captured and investigated, and the total number of colonies seem to be on par with those of humanity. Due to this, the theory that there is some sort of large-scale breeding facility in the bug's homeworld was prevalent, and discovering and destroying it may bring this endless war to a close. I remained spaced out inside the escape pod, which was now in the middle of its descent planetside. I haven't been able to completely accept the mysterious attack and the death of all my comrades as reality just yet. On the ship, I mostly just acted as Iris instructed. It all just began to sink in when I became all alone inside the pod and finally had the opportunity to calm down a bit. The faces of everyone from my platoon and my commander flashed through my mind. Before I knew it, I was shedding tears. Damn it. At this moment, the pod began shaking violently. What happened? The AI of the escape pod, currently entering the atmosphere of the planet, responded. Are there any problems? The shaking became more intense. Hey. Is everything really okay? The shaking further intensified. He tilde why? Something's definitely off. Even if it's installed on a disposable one-time use escape pod, this isn't the way an AI should respond. It might have taken some damage or something. Are things really gonna be fine? Come to think of it, I've never heard of an escape pod being used to directly land on a planet before. Let me check it out with my nanums. There are only a few instances, just as I thought. Well, guess that's natural since battles don't usually occur this close to a planet. I wondered just how much time had passed. When I'd finally lost my sense of time, the shaking suddenly subsided. The thrusters fired up and the rotation stopped. After a few moments, an impact came along with a snapping sound. Next, I heard a gushing sound. Was something leaking out? What's wrong this time? The heck? Where'd they buy this thing anyway? It's my first time encountering a machine with such poor specs. A crack opened up just because of the parachute getting deployed. I'm absolutely positive this thing isn't up to regular Empire standards. Is there any problem with the parachute itself? Phew. Guess we'll make it somehow. Hey pod. What's the name of your manufacturer, by the way? Ah. So that's it. Orlando Heavy Industries was a long-standing company, but 2 years ago a critical defect was discovered on one of their products, followed by the discovery of more critical defects on most of their other merchandise. Presently, they're a company burdened with lots of issues. I'm sure this escape pod's also one of those defective items of theirs. There would be no problems with the landing, right? Wait, are we actually leaking air? Damn, this is hopeless. Wait, that's it. Is the air outside breathable? Phew. That's a relief. I tried to check out the scenery outside through the external monitor, but couldn't see much, because the monitor was too small. 2. Finally. Wait, we're landing where? What do you mean we're landing on water? Change course immediately. Or rather, tell that to me sooner, damn it. The thrusters activated once more. I'm really starting to get pissed off at this damn AI. Will this pod be able to float on water? I just knew you'd say that. We impacted the surface quite heavily. I hurriedly snapped my seatbelt off and began to prepare for getting out of the pod. I would be bringing with me a backpack, pulse rifle, laser gun, electromagnetic blade knife, the pouch containing the processor module, uniform, cleanroom work overalls, and 2 blankets. It's a considerable amount of luggage. I wasn't able to bring the PET bottles containing water with me. I had no choice but to bet on the lake water being potable. If it wasn't, bringing the PET bottles would only prolong my eventual death by just a little bit anyway. I shoved the laser gun, processor module, uniform, and cleanroom overalls into the backpack and hoisted it onto my back. I also slipped the rifle's sling over my head and onto my shoulder. The blankets also had slings attached to them, so I brought them over my head as well and carried them under each arm. I checked the outside with the external monitor. The heck? This thing's really starting to sink. Okay, open the hatch. When the hatch opened, water started flooding in. I somehow managed to grab onto the edge of the hatch and pulled myself out of the pod. The air definitely has no problems. From what I can see, the shore seems to be about 70 meters ahead. Looks like I came pretty far out. I wasn't exactly good at swimming, but it's not like I can't reach it. The rolled-up blankets I held on both sides seemed to be made of non-absorbent material and helped me to stay afloat. The rifle was obviously quite heavy. I swam and reached the shore in about 3 to 4 minutes. Phew. I'm saved. I'm glad it's daytime. If I landed during the night, I'm sure I would have had a harder time. I scanned the surroundings. The local flora seems to be fairly similar to the ones I've seen on the other planets I've been to. They were mainly green in color and had shapes resembling those of the plants I'm familiar with. You can even say they somehow remind me of those from my home planet. But what should I do now? When I thought about this, I noticed something important. In the first place, the reason why I was forced to evacuate to this planet was because of the ship lacking oxygen, and Iris needing some time in order to repair it. Without the communication equipment on the escape pod, I won't be able to contact Iris. The communication function of the nanoms can't reach her after all. The effective range is only about a few kilometers. Escape pod, respond. Please respond. It's no use. I tried hailing it several times more, but there was no response. Was that pod water resistant in the first place? I should have confirmed that. I was busy being frustrated by the RE's stupidity earlier, so it never occurred to me. It was able to withstand a vacuum environment, so it should be able to function underwater too, but I can't really bring myself to expect something of the sort from that piece of junk. At worst, I'll have to find a way to salvage it out of the water. But that would be totally impossible on my own. Should I get in contact with the local life forms and ask them for help? That's the only thing I can think of for now. Wait, hold up. It was then that I finally realized something. Why the heck am I letting my guard down in a place like this? This place is the same as a battlefield. Wild creatures often have habitats in large bodies of water. I quickly brought my pulse rifle up in a fluster. This place really resembles what I'm usually accustomed to, so I lost any sense of caution before I knew it. For now, I'll just get out of here and find a spot with a good vantage point. I saw something resembling a hill nearby, so I'll head over there. The hill was a large, rocky formation with a diameter of more than 10 meters and a height of about 5 meters. There were a lot of footholds, so I could climb up quite easily. Well now, that's quite a nice, wide view. Potential assailants would be able to spot me easily as well, but I got myself a rifle. That means I have a general advantage. I scanned the area and noticed something falling from the sky to the east. I recognized what it was almost immediately. I've watched scenes like this on the Holobit lots of times already. Dang! They are burning up. A lot of smoldering objects were falling not only from the east, but the northern and western skyline as well. Ah! Those are definitely wreckage debris from the ship. Ah! Was it no use after all? Iris stated that the odds of successfully reconstructing the ship was 54%. Though the odds were barely more than half the ideal numbers, I really believed it would work out somehow. Even if the odds were 50/50ths at best, I just couldn't imagine that Iris would fail. Were there any other possible explanations for this happening other than failure? No, ejecting foreign materials on a planet was a serious violation of military regulations. Furthermore, Iris wouldn't drop these things on purpose, because she knows I'm still stuck here. Ah! No other words could leave my mouth. The ship debris continued to rain down, seemingly without end. 2. I spent an unknown amount of time just blankly gazing up at the sky. I was brought back to my senses by hunger. Let's just eat something for now. Damn! I let my guard down again. Well, this time it was due to being shocked silly. It truly feels like being struck by a finishing blow and getting absolutely wrecked as a result. Now, I guess I'll just have to resolve myself to live on this planet till my eventual death. No, was this really the case? There's no way that Iris would just crash and burn after failing without doing anything else. There should have been enough time for her to launch an emergency beacon containing an SOS communique or something. A Galaxy-class interstellar warship had suddenly gone missing. A search team would probably be dispatched at the very least. But the probability of them finding this planet, and even this particular star system, was quite low. High Command was familiar with the navigation schedules. The search would probably center around the coordinates where we were actually supposed to warp out from. It'll be hard to count on them finding this place since we were forced to warp out here mid-route due to the attack. Against my expectations, the rations were actually quite juicy and delicious. I'm parched as well, so I guess I'll try drinking the lake water. I'm still bummed by the fact that I was unable to bring those PET bottles filled with drinking water. Judging from the sun's position, I guess it's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon right now. A gentle breeze blew by, and it felt quite nice. When I moved my gaze toward the lake, I discovered something. Hey, that's... There were about 5 PET bottles floating around on the water surface and swaying along with the breeze. I think there were actually more than 10, but did they sync together with the pod? Oh, well. This was quite an unexpected find. I'll go retrieve them and try out the lake water while I'm at it. I scooped out some water from the lake with my hands, drank some of it and immediately spat it out. Well, it does taste like normal water at least. I had my nanum check it out. Okay. With this, drinking water won't be a problem for the time being. At this time, I noticed that there were a lot of footprints resembling those made by humans on the ground along the water's edge. This made my alert level rise, and I quickly brought my rifle up. I remained vigilant, but noticed no other abnormalities. The footprints weren't new and seemed to have been made about 1 or 2 days ago. When I scrutinized them further, I saw that even though they somewhat resembled human footprints, there were some definite differences. The number of toes seemed to be just 4 and were quite small, like those of a child's. Anyway, let's get out of this place first. However, I carried too much baggage, and with the inclusion of 5 PET bottles that I had to hold with both hands, I ended up being unable to properly wield my rifle. Having no choice, I decided to hold 3 bottles with my left arm and wielded the rifle with my right. Let's hide the remaining 2 bottles somewhere inconspicuous. I managed to make my way back to the rocky hill from before. I placed my baggage down and caught my breath. Come to think of it, the summit of this rock was quite a good spot. If I pressed myself down, it would be quite difficult to catch sight of me if one's looking from below. It was the perfect place to observe the lake. It's probably best if I watched over the lake from here. I finally managed to calm myself down somewhat. I somehow panicked earlier, but when you think about it, the possibility of creatures, such as those resembling monkeys existing on this planet, was much higher than there being human-like life forms here. To date, members of the human race naturally sporting only 4 toes haven't been discovered yet after all. It's already evening. I'm really drained from all that's happened today. Since I can't possibly go without any sleep, I'll just put Nanam on alert while I hit the hay. Even though I said putting Nanam on alert, it just means having my hearing enhanced several times through the use of the Nanam's sense augmentation as a precautionary measure. Even if my hearing gets enhanced, my surroundings won't get suddenly flooded with noise, but would get dead silent instead. That's because all the sounds I'll hear would be intercepted by Nanam. If Nanam judges the situation to be unusual, they would instantly wake me up, making this a very convenient function. I laid down one blanket and covered myself with the other. Only my ears were left sticking out. After issuing the mental order, the sounds from my surroundings were completely silenced. I quickly drifted off, perhaps due to being too worn out. 2. The cry of a bird rang within my ears. It was right in the middle of the sunrise. How can Nanam tell if it's dawn already if my eyes were closed shut the whole time? They're a capable bunch, as always. I don't really feel like sleeping anymore. Just how many hours does this planet's daytime last? I'll get up at dawn again tomorrow to confirm. I plan to observe the lake for most of the day today. I can't do anything careless anymore. I ate my rations and gulped down some water. I pressed myself down on my belly on top of the blanket and began monitoring the lake. Since Nanam can also enhance my vision, zooming in about 10 times would be a piece of cake. I passed the time like this until noon, which I estimated from the position of the sun in the sky. Oh yeah, guess it's about time to retrieve those PET bottles. The moment I thought of this, those appeared. The distance was about 300 meters away. At first glance the figures resembled humans. But they were quite short. I zoomed in a bit more. They're about 120 centimeters tall, Altogether, there were 5 of them. I really can't think of them as humans. Their complexion was green in color. But it wasn't pure green. It was a strange, somewhat darkened hue resulting from mixing green and white. I caught some voices crying out *Gukya Gukya, with my enhanced hearing. They held blunt wooden sticks on their hands. Are those supposed to be clubs? Some of them held long, spear-like wooden sticks with pointed ends. They also seemed to be wearing really filthy loincloths. Well, since they are wielding weapons like clubs and spears and wearing loincloths, they seem to be some sort of intelligent life form. When I zoomed in on them more, I found their mugs to be quite ugly. There was nothing good to point out about their appearance: extremely flattened faces, eyes which slanted upwards and pointed ears. Perhaps the only intelligent life forms on this planet aside from me were these guys. Yeah, that's actually quite possible. Let's try to get rid of any initial prejudices. Nothing would change if I continue hiding in this place. Let's suck it up and try to say hello. I won't be in any danger from the weapons they were wielding. I hid all my other stuff inside a gap in the rocks and prepped my weapons. I brandished my pulse rifle and put the laser gun, an electromagnetic blade knife, inside the pockets of my suit. Those guys seemed to be heading towards the lake. I approached the place while remaining alert. There were times when I lost sight of them, but because they constantly cried out *Gukya Gukya loudly, I easily tracked them once more. They weren't paying attention to their surroundings at all. Are these guys really intelligent life forms? But well, if some random alien were to see human children going wild while messing around, perhaps he would find the sight similar to these guys making a racket. When they reached the lakeside, they made even more of a ruckus. It might cause them to panic if I suddenly approached them and called out, so I decided to get their attention from some distance away. "Hey!" I shouted out in a voice loud enough not to lose to theirs. The surroundings were instantly wrapped in silence. All 5 of them turned their attention my way. I raised both hands to indicate, I don't have any intention to attack. But my rifle remained at the ready over my shoulder. "Hello. Good day to you all." I called out to them again. Of course, they couldn't possibly understand me. I just wanted my meaning to come across using the tone of my voice. Each of them made eye contact with the rest and started laughing hysterically. Some of them even started drooling. I approached them little by little. "Wait, those are..." 2 PET bottles were pierced through by a wooden spear held by one of them. It looks like they found where I hid them and skewered the bottles for fun. After seeing that, I finally lost my patience and snapped. These guys are definitely not intelligent life forms. Rather, they are actually raring to attack for the sake of making me their meal. I raised the rifle off my shoulder and took aim. When they saw my actions, they started running crazily towards me. The distance was less than 10 meters, but that was enough. I've already gotten a lock on all of them through the virtual target scope displayed by Nanum. It doesn't matter how wildly they move about. I simply turned the rifle towards them and pulled the trigger. The M151 pulse rifle was directly linked to my Nanum, enabling the remote-type lens attached to its body to automatically track enemies and bring them down with concentrated pulse laser bursts. Firing off consecutive bursts 5 times didn't even take 0.5 seconds. Then the rifle finally went silent. The Imperial Army issue pulse rifle was actually really awesome. My diminutive assailants toppled over helplessly. Shit. Catards sure got full of yourselves, huh? I've managed to get enlightened about the greatness of PET bottles just yesterday. Humans can't live without water. Perhaps this lake was the only water source in the immediate vicinity. Without these PET bottles, it was possible that I wouldn't be able to go too far away from this lake at all. And these guys ruined these precious PET bottles just for fun. I ranted and raged for a while, and when I managed to calm down, Nanam made an abrupt request. I have the nature of not being able to turn the people counting on me down, even though I don't exactly like the things they want me to do. Well, whatever. Let's get dissecting. I don't particularly hate seeing blood, but I really didn't want to touch these guys if I could help it. As I didn't want to touch them, I simply hacked them in two. I cut them from the base of the head all the way to the crotch with the electromagnetic blade knife. Gah! It smells. An extremely disgusting smell wafted out. After cutting them down, I used the spears they had on them to turn them over so Nanam could analyze them. When I prodded the spot indicated with the wooden spear, a bloody ball about 2 centimeters in size rolled out. I wonder what this is. It sported a cloudy white coloration. Nanam wanted data about their genetic code, so I picked up the ball with my fingers and hurriedly headed towards the lake to wash my hands and knife. The PET bottles they stabbed now sported holes right in the middle, so I cut them with my knife and made 2 makeshift cups from the bottom portions. These are great. For the current me, who has no access to daily necessities, these things are equivalent to treasures. Basing on this planet's orbital path, it should be roughly the start of midday right now. I really need to procure some food soon. But will I be able to safely consume and gain nutrients from the things on this planet? In the first place, I managed to glean a lot from the encounter with those guys earlier. They totally didn't have their guards up at all while living around this place and even made such a loud racket. This may indicate that there was nothing which they perceived as an immediate threat within the area. But perhaps there really were threats present, but they just failed to detect them. It's also possible that it simply slipped their not-so-bright minds right. All of them could be probable. I'll have to stay vigilant. Imperial Navy warships all basically follow a cylindrical build. Ships were made out of a combination of 1/4, 1/2 and all-round cylindrical blocks called sections. The main reason for this was of course for ease of maintenance. In ancient times, the ships were actually built as a unified whole based on an integrated framework, but maintaining them proved to be a considerable challenge. Perhaps this was because it was a time without war back then. By using the modular construction system, even if a ship gets severely damaged in some places, it would be possible to repair it within a mere week, providing there were enough replacement sections to spare. Even though a ship's overall structural integrity may suffer when using the modular construction method, this disadvantage could now be sufficiently compensated by today's advanced technologies. According to the recent report from the nodes, the damage suffered by the gravity control section seems to be lower than initially estimated. Finally, some relatively good news. Now then, since the captain has successfully escaped, let us start the repairs. First, let us cut off the engine block. There was zero chance of repairing it, so it was now completely unnecessary. After doing this, an entire quarter of the ship has been disposed of. Actually, dumping foreign materials onto a planet with intelligent life forms was a serious violation of military regulations, but as we are in the middle of a first-grade emergency situation, this action currently poses no problem. The projected crash point of the debris was about 2,000 kilometers away from the captain's estimated landing coordinates, so no problems there either. I'll make use of a gravitational tractor beam to drop the wreckage. If it fell onto the planet with its current size, it may cause the planet to be destroyed. I made it self-destruct into smaller pieces of debris after it gained enough distance from the rest of the ship. One can say that the only definite advantage humanity has over the bugs was technology. Thus, each and every individual section of the ship was equipped with self-destruct mechanisms in order to prevent the leakage of vital technological knowledge. Of course, these mechanisms were designed by the Imperial military to activate without fail no matter how much damage they may possibly take. Next, I activated the auxiliary engines used for attitude control, making the entire body of the ship rotate. I plan to make use of centrifugal force to make the damaged sections drop onto the desired coordinates. The faster the spin, the better. After the auxiliary engines managed to give the spin enough momentum, each section, which was damaged beyond repair, came off the rest of the ship one after another. I measured the timing and proceeded to detach the first and second cryosleep bays as well. The separated sections were also dropped towards the planet using the gravitational tractor beam. This allowed me to guide their trajectory little by little. These sections were also made to self-destruct after gaining enough distance. The earlier actions taken have raised the probability of successful repair and reconstruction to 68%. The hangar bay also needs to be disposed of, but its overall mass was too great. The earlier attacks completely wiped out the 2 high-speed space-use reconnaissance craft and 4 large-sized landing crafts stationed within it. I ordered all remaining vessels capable of atmospheric re-entry to descend. I'm sure they'll be useful to the captain. Afterward, I finally got rid of the hangar. I also dropped it using the tractor beam. A while earlier, when the captain recited the prepared command prompts, he changed the wording from simply "preserve the fighting strength of this ship" to "preserve the fighting strength of this ship and the Navy's honor." This was probably due to the influence of the senior officer education he underwent. It was completely in line with Imperial Army Regulations Article 1, Paragraph 2A. The Imperial Army's honor must be protected and upheld at all times. But, considering the situation, he really can't blame me for choosing to just focus on preserving the ship instead. A lot of the ship's vital functions have now been lost. Navigation is currently impossible, the main and secondary cannons cannot be fired, and FTL communications cannot be sent out. Honestly, in this ship's current state, it won't even be able to stand up to a mere Imperial satellite-class destroyer, or the Bug's basic BG-1 light cruiser. This ship's present dismal battle capabilities notwithstanding, maximum efforts must still be made in order to repair and restore it to peak performance. In order to achieve this, the industrial section, life support section, medical bay, and gravity control section must all be kept fully functional no matter what. 2. The AI installed on the detached hangar section was currently in the midst of confusion. An order stating all vessels capable of atmospheric re-entry were to be launched off, while disregarding all safety regulations, came just earlier. Even if these vessels were indeed capable of re-entry, they weren't designed to do so under such an unreasonable trajectory. Just how many of them would be able to successfully land? Right now, the AI was on standby while waiting for the hangar section to reach an optimal position for a launch attempt. The hangar's AI turned its attention to the general-purpose robots lined up inside the hangar. These robots weren't equipped with unassisted re-entry capabilities. They were designed for performing various jobs in place of actual people. To that end, they were created closely mimicking the human form, with working pairs of hands and legs. Although they didn't have much with regards to actual fighting capabilities, they came equipped with a wide variety of useful functions befitting their status as general-purpose machines. Moreover, they were capable of long-term independent operations akin to drones. A suggestion was made by one of the individual nodes making up the AI. Check further inside and confirm the availability of drones. It proposed a plan to combine the drones and robots in order for them to attempt re-entry together. The drones had hooks on their undersides for the purpose of equipping them with optional parts. The specs of both the drones and robots were checked and the possible effects of air resistance were factored in. There was a high probability of success. A plan which involved the bots grabbing onto the drones' hooks in order for the drones to take care of re-entry was immediately put into action. If this proves impossible, the bots merely had to let go of the hooks. Of course, the drones won't be able to fly while carrying the bots under the effect of gravity, but gliding near the surface was doable. The bots were equipped with thrusters to enhance their jumping capability. If they use them to decrease the speed of descent, a relatively safe landing should be possible. Soon a drone and bot pair were put together, and the bot was ordered to grab the drone's hook. There was actually quite the number of bots compared to the drones, but that can't be helped. 2. Meanwhile, Iris was busy repeatedly detaching and redocking the remaining functional sections of the ship. She'd just finished the 14th docking procedure earlier. She detaches a section, grabs it with a tractor beam, and redocks it someplace else on the ship. By continuously repeating these procedures, the ship's trajectory gradually changes in direction. Just a little bit more and the ship would reach an ideal trajectory to attempt a swing by. Since the engine section was lost, the ship's propulsive capabilities were extremely limited. Even a single mistake was unacceptable. The plan was to do a swing by in conjunction with the auxiliary thrusters in order to move to a stable orbit. It would take some time, but that can't be helped. I currently can't get in touch with the captain. He should have long reached the surface by now. 2. The hangar has finally reached an optimal point for re-entry. The hatch was opened, and the tractor beam installed in front launched vessels and units set for atmospheric re-entry one after another. The drones had a shape resembling a bird and were 15 meters long, 10 meters wide and 4 meters tall. The general-purpose bots began approaching them and grabbing onto their hooks. Pairs of drones and bots were continuously launched out. The launched units immediately fired up their hydrogen ramjet engines. They had to hurry and get away from the hangar. That's because it was set to self-destruct soon. When all the launched units gained sufficient distance, the hangar section finally self-destructed. All units braced themselves for the ensuing shock from the blast. They then used aerial braking in order to approach the optimum angle for atmospheric re-entry. 2. About 80% of the units managed to survive atmospheric re-entry. The re-entry angle was so bad that 20% of them were ultimately destroyed due to getting swept up in the explosion of the hangar section. The drones which managed to safely get away had to conserve their limited fuel, so they began gliding and planned to do so until they reached lower altitudes. In order not to get separated, they arranged themselves in an orderly formation and descended together. The leader unit instructed a drone and robot pair to fire up their thrusters and take point. When the pair reached an altitude of 1,000 meters, their hydrogen ramjet engines ignited in order to slow down their falling speed. All the remaining units focused their attention on the data being continuously sent back by the leading pair. All the drones were VTOL types and made use of jet nozzles for attitude control. They were designed for these types of maneuvers. The bot managed to successfully land, but it seems it let go of the hook a little early. It fell from a height of 30 meters, but it was fine in the end. Using the trajectory data sent by the first pair as a reference, all other units quickly created a feasible flight plan and simultaneously activated their ramjet engines when they reached the 1,000-meter mark. 2. The drones instructed the bots hanging onto them to wait until they reach an altitude of 15 meters before letting go in order for them to land safely. All remaining units managed to land without a hitch. The leader unit then ordered them to stand by. The general-purpose bots gathered together and stood in position. The drones deployed their propellers and used them to fly upwards. They rose past the cloud cover and used the energy provided by this planet's sun in order to recharge their energy batteries. The depleted hydrogen fuel must also be replenished by taking it in from the surrounding atmosphere. Iris was surprised by the report she received from the surface of the planet. About 80% of the drones, 60% of the general-purpose robots, 2 large industrial tractors, and 3 excavators managed to land safely. It was an unexpected success rate. Reconnaissance drone DR 3020 general-purpose work, bot BT 122W general-purpose tractor TR 400G test drilling machine KS 10G. Unfortunately, the mobile weapons stationed on the large-type landing crafts weren't capable of unassisted atmospheric re-entry and were mostly wiped out. It seems the tractors and excavators were able to safely descend because they were put in specialized containers capable of atmospheric re-entry. But an opportunity to put them to good use may not even present itself in the first place. However, the drones and general-purpose bots were quite useful, especially in this current situation where contact with the captain has been cut off. In the meantime, I ordered the drones to search for the captain, seek out places that seem to harbor intelligent life and observe the local life forms residing within them. The other units incapable of flight were ordered to stand by, because they couldn't make use of the cloud cover to mask their movements. I can't seem to contact the escape pod. I wonder if something has happened to the captain. I started to explore the surrounding area in order to procure food. I'll start by going around the lake. In this situation, the first possible food item which comes to mind was fish, but I was not sure if there were any present and I also lack fishing implements for catching them. I could shoot it with the rifle if a big enough specimen appeared, but retrieving it would be a pain. Let's put that plan on hold first. Guess I'll go for plant life then. But it was difficult to spot the edible ones without the proper knowledge. I resorted to using nanum to check them by kneading the leaves between my fingers until fluids came out and having Nanam scan them afterward. I started to indiscriminately knead the leaves of all the plants I could manage to lay my eyes on. All right. But when I tried to put it in my mouth, it turned out tasting really god-awful. I immediately spat it out and instructed Nanam to only point out the things which could be considered as food. 2. Great, I finally got one. I tried the leaves, but they tasted really bad. I tried the stem, but it was the same. I pulled it out from the ground and saw a small tuber-like bulb growing from the roots, with a size of about 3 centimeters. When I tried eating it, it tasted like raw potatoes. It wasn't exactly delicious, but the taste may change if I baked it a little. Okay, let's gather these for today. While I was preoccupied with gathering the potato lookalikes, a rodent resembling both a rabbit and a mouse appeared about 30 meters away. It was frozen on the spot when our eyes met. Was this thing edible? Okay, wise guy. You're cute, but I'll still have you serve as my meal. I quickly put up my rifle and finished it off with one shot. I estimated the rabbit-like, rat-like creature to be about 5 kilograms after I came closer to have a look. Its ears were too small for a rabbit's, but too big to be those of a rat's. When I shoved my finger inside the wound opened by the rifle shot, Nanam judged it to be suitable as food, so I decided to bring it back. I decided to name it Mouse Rabbit. It sounded more edible than Rabbit Mouse in any case. But well, they're both rodents, so I guess anything's good. I managed to gather 20 pieces of mock potatoes and hunted myself a mouse rabbit. It's about time to return to the rocky hill. I managed to procure food surprisingly easily. If things went like this all the time, then I might just manage to survive somehow. I decided to dismantle my quarry at the lakeside before I go back to the rocky outcrop to start cooking. I dismembered the creature I hunted while listening to the instructions given out by Nanam. The parts suitable for being eaten were lesser in amount than expected. Just the 2 front legs and 2 hind legs to be exact. About a kilo's worth of meat, I guess. If I took away the bones, it would be around 700 grams, give or take. Can I use the fur for something? I couldn't think of any obvious uses for it at the moment. I don't even have any idea how to use it in the first place. It's unfortunate, but I'll have to dispose of it. Then I suddenly remembered something. I tried to contact the pod once more, but there was still no response. Well, since Iris was now gone, I didn't really feel that disappointed about this outcome. I went back to the rocky hill and started prepping the mouse rabbit meat for cooking. I haven't tried cooking outdoors since I was in junior officer school. I'm kinda getting fired up about this. I gathered some firewood and lit them up with my laser gun. Cooking can be said to be my only hobby. I couldn't really do it while on board a ship, but I sometimes borrowed a multipurpose room whenever we were stationed on a base and treated the rest of my squad with my cooking. At times when I couldn't cook, I researched various recipes and scoured gourmet sites for useful info. I might only be roasting some pieces of meat, but it's definitely no simple task. Guess it's really hard to cook properly without using kitchen tools, huh? Well, technically, I wasn't really cooking, but just holding the meat over an open fire. I finally managed to roast a piece of leg skewered on a tree branch. When I bit into the well-roasted thigh meat, I found its taste to be kinda like chicken. It was slightly gamey, but it was tolerable. But honestly, it was hard to place the taste. If one asked me if it was delicious or not, I'd probably answer neither. It wasn't awful, but I couldn't exactly call it tasty either. In the first place, only the natural taste of the meat was present since I didn't use any spices or condiments like salt. I might have expected a tad too much since it took no small amount of effort to dismantle it, gather firewood and cook the thing. But I think it'll definitely taste better if I used some salt. Salt, huh? Is it possible to secure some rock salt nearby? It's already evening now. I'll go look for some tomorrow morning. Since it was a waste otherwise, I proceeded to wolf down the rest of the meat. I managed to get full just from eating meat. What should I do with those mock potatoes I gathered? I placed the mock potatoes on top of the smoldering remains of the bonfire and lightly covered them with soil on top. This should bake them quite nicely. Well, I guess it's fine even if this didn't work out. Since it's already gotten quite dark, I decided to hit the sack. 2. Ha! It looks like I slept well last night. The morning sunlight looks dazzling. Wait, that reminds me. So it's roughly the same as my home planet. Let's take a look at those mock potatoes, which underwent my cooking experiment. Some parts looked burnt and some parts didn't. I peeled one and tried tasting it. Hey, these are pretty good. They do taste like regular baked potatoes. This will be my breakfast for today. I really wish I had some salt and cooking tools right now, I thought to myself while in the middle of scarfing down the baked mock potatoes. One really can't help but want the things they don't have. I plan to explore and search for food items again today. I gotta do my best. For starters, I'll continue surveying the areas around the lake. The entire lakeshore area should stretch out to more than 15 kilometers. There were animal trails present, so I didn't have much difficulty walking around the place. Once I find some new plant types, I'll immediately start pressing them between my fingers. 2. A response came out soon after. It looks just like normal grass, but it was emitting a subtle aroma, so it might be a type of herb. The taste wasn't bad as well. I pocketed 5 bundles of stalks. When I walked about halfway around the lake, I managed to reach a large river which branched out from it. Well, since it was such a large lake, discovering a river wasn't really all that surprising. I gazed at the river intently. If there was a river here, then following it should eventually lead me out to sea. I confirmed the existence of said sea when I checked out the external monitor during the escape pod's descent. If I went to the sea, I should probably manage to acquire some salt. This definitely needs to be considered. I crossed the large river by jumping over it. With nanome-enhanced musculature, jumping over a 5-meter wide river was quite easy, even without doing a run-up. I'd walked around for a while and needed quite a bit of plant matter before finally finding something suitable for eating. It looked like a type of leafy vegetable. It tasted fine when I tried it. I can probably use it to make a salad or something. I also pocketed 5 bundles of them. After walking a while more, I managed to spot a boar-like creature drinking water from the lakeshore. It was about 400 meters away. Although I kinda do feel sorry for it, I'll have it serve as dinner for tonight. I have to secure as much food as possible after all. I pulled out my rifle and obtained a lock. A distance of 400 meters was nothing before this baby's zoom-in function. After sufficient magnification was gained, I immediately pulled the trigger. The boar-like creature had already fallen the moment the sound of a plasma round firing rang out. When I approached my quarry, I found it to be quite larger than expected. It's definitely more than 100 kilograms. Its tusks were a good bit larger than the wild boar I was familiar with. It wouldn't be wrong to call this creature a fanged boar due to these tusks measuring more than 30 centimeters. You'd definitely bite the dust if you get stabbed by these things. Nature really can't be underestimated. There were dangerous creatures like this running around after all. Nanam judged it to be suitable as food. But getting something so large was troublesome for me. Even if I managed to procure lots of meat, I don't have any means to refrigerate them for preservation. I couldn't possibly finish them all in one sitting either. And the only cooking method available to me right now was roasting deboned meat over an open fire. Since it couldn't be helped, I settled for cutting off one hind leg with my knife and brought along just that. Even one hind leg could account for 10 kilograms of meat. After walking some distance away, while looking around, I suddenly heard the sound of splashing water. When I turned back, I saw the remains of the wild boar get taken by something from within the lake. It easily pulled down that huge boar creature with room to spare. I got flustered and hurriedly took some distance away from the lake. There was that huge boar and that mysterious creature as well. The reason I remained safe until now could be said to be all thanks to sheer dumb luck. I renewed my resolve to be even more careful. I managed to safely return to the rocky hill while remaining alert for possible threats. When I woke up earlier, I kinda felt like taking a bath in the lake water. But after seeing what happened just now, I won't do it even if I was offered a huge sum of money to do so. But as expected, one couldn't help but feel uncomfortable after missing a bath for 2 days straight. What should I do? For now, I'll just have a meal first. The fire wouldn't be able to wrap around it properly if I just put the whole leg over it as is. So I sliced it into thinner pieces and skewered said pieces with thin tree branches. The meat was done in a jiffy. I took some of the herbs I got earlier and tore them to little pieces. I mixed them with the meat and the salad juice vegetables and ate them all together. This thing's quite delicious. It was overflowing with meat juices and had a sort of wild flavor. There was still no salt, but this was a nice enough delicacy. The herbs and vegetables definitely made the difference. I ate ravenously and stuffed myself full in no time. I could now barely classify this as a proper dish. There was still a lot of meat left, so I'll save them for tomorrow. It shouldn't go bad in just one day. After satisfying my stomach, I proceeded to think about the things I managed to discover today: the large river, fanged boar, and that mysterious creature residing within the lake waters. After successfully procuring some water and food yesterday, I felt that the area around the lake wasn't as dangerous as expected. But it seems that was a hasty conclusion. If I follow the direction of the large river, I'd reach the sea. Salt and seafood were both very tempting prospects. But I'm still mostly unfamiliar with this planet. If I rushed into things without sufficient info, that might lead to me losing my life. From the way things were going, the probability of me living and dying while remaining all alone on this planet was quite high. There was no internet. There were no other people to talk to. There weren't any forms of entertainment. The only thing to look forward to was probably eating. When I thought as such, an impulse to go adventuring suddenly came over me. In order to live enjoyably and have no regrets, I'll have to take some risks. Yeah, that doesn't sound too bad. I'm getting really fired up now. All right. I'll follow the river and go out to sea. I don't plan to live like a recluse in this kind of place. I'm gonna go on an adventure. I've now retired from the military. From this moment on, I'm an adventurer. Once I've decided as such, I proceeded to prep everything for my departure tomorrow. I plan to pack the remaining meat to serve as my meal provisions for the journey. I couldn't just shove them directly inside my backpack, so I looked around for something to wrap them with and found a plant with long, wide leaves. I tried pressing on them with my fingers. I grabbed a whole bunch of the leaves and did some trial and error. I finally managed to make something that could serve as food wrap after a few tries. The key was to weave them together. I sliced the rest of the meat. I was worried about getting food poisoning, so I decided to properly cook it all tomorrow. Next, I gathered some more mock potatoes on the way to the lake. I secured some drinking water from the lake itself. Hey! That's right. I can probably take a bath if I simply just fetched some water from the lake to use. I don't really have to bathe in the lake itself. I finished all my preparations in no time. It was already quite dark, so I guess it's time to sleep. When I woke up at dawn, I immediately started grilling the rest of the meat. After I finished grilling them, I tore the herbs over them and wrapped them up with the leafy vegetables. I then put the finished pieces inside the makeshift food container made of leaves. With this, my meat wrap-packed meal was complete. The backpack contains the pouch with the processor modules, my military uniform, and work overalls, the remaining food rations, 3 PET bottles filled with drinking water, and the rare material tablet case. I heaved the backpack onto my back, carried the blankets under each arm, put the laser gun inside a pocket holster, and slung the rifle over my shoulder. Sporting full equipment, I walked away from the lakeshore area and headed towards the river. This will be useful for quickly discovering mock potatoes growing along the area, since they'd be automatically highlighted in red. I managed to find some almost right away. I pulled them out and put them inside my backpack's side pocket. The pockets quickly became full of mock potatoes, so I stopped gathering them. There's a long journey ahead, so I can't spend too much time doing this. I was able to reach the large river within 2 hours. I was afraid of bathing in the river tributary near the large lake due to that unknown creature, so let's look for a place where the water level isn't so deep. After about 30 minutes of walking along the riverside, I finally managed to find a spot with a nice, clear view of the surroundings and water depth which felt just right. The water was deep enough to immerse myself in, but the riverbed still remained fairly visible, and there seemed to be no unknown organisms lurking within. I still maintained a level of alertness, but seeing that there were no obvious threats, I finally managed to take a quick bath. YA. That's cold. But I got excited from the joy of being able to thoroughly wash my body after 3 days. Let's wash the uniform too while we're at it. It was unfortunate that I didn't have any body soap or shampoo with me, but it was still rather refreshing. That was great. I put away my freshly washed work clothes after squeezing them dry, and pulled out a spare one from my backpack. It was a little wrinkled, but it can't be helped. I started walking once more after refilling the PET bottles with water. Then, after walking along the river for about an hour, I heard a faint gushing sound. I rushed towards the direction of the sound in slight disbelief, but really did manage to see a waterfall in the distance. It seemed to have an elevation of more than 30 meters. I've only ever seen waterfalls on the Holobit before, so I was quite psyched to see one in person. But this was a bit troublesome. I didn't have a way to reach it since there were no available paths leading towards it. After searching for a while, I managed to find something resembling an animal trail. The trail continued away from the river, but I have no other choice. There's no time to carve out another route from scratch, and it seemed to be fine since the path was leading downstream. I've already walked for several hours, so I've become quite hungry. I decided to eat my lunch. The meat wraps were delicious even when cold. It's just around noon, huh? After establishing the length of individual days on this planet, it became possible to indicate the current time on a small virtual window display. After finishing my lunch, I started traveling once more. And just as I thought about finding a good place to sleep while it was still bright outside, I suddenly found myself arriving near an open clearing. It continued along towards the distance. I thought it somehow felt like it was purposely cleared out, and when I got a closer look, my suspicion was confirmed. It was an authentic road. There were traces of wheel tracks running through it. It was a road made by carving out the side of a mountain, and seemed to be 5 meters wide. I brandished my rifle and scanned the immediate area. There seemed to be no problems for the time being. But this was really a surprise. Did those green-colored creatures make this? No, they are definitely not intelligent enough to make something of this scale. When I looked closer, I found some indents resembling hoofprints of domesticated horses used for transport along with the wheel tracks. Were there actually horses on this planet? Anyway, it was certainly a hoofed creature. Was this something like a carriage that appears in stories? There were a lot of hoofprints scattered all over. Maybe it was a carriage pulled by multiple horses or something. The hoofprints were facing forward relative to my location, so the carriage most likely moved from the direction to my right towards my left. The wheel tracks were pretty deep, so it seemed to be quite a large carriage. I'll try chasing after it. This is the first clue I've obtained about possible intelligent life. Such a chance may not present itself easily next time. The tracks look relatively new. They should have been made about 2 days prior at most. Alright, time to get serious. I then started running after the carriage. Humans breathe in oxygen and discharge carbon dioxide from their bodies. Under the long-distance sprint mode, the nanoms reinforce the lung cells in order to maximize the efficiency of this bodily process, and also enhance the maximum oxygen intake capacity of one's blood. In other words, it would allow you to run without feeling much fatigue. This makes it possible to continue running at considerable speed for a long time, but it can't be used often, because it puts too much strain on the body. I've been running for quite a while now. I should have passed more than 100 kilometers already. I've kept the same speed since I started running, but I still haven't managed to catch up. It's almost evening, so it might be time to give up on pursuing them for today. But at this point, my enhanced hearing managed to pick up sounds of fighting in the distance. The road bent and twisted around the side of the mountain, so I haven't been able to see anything yet. I stopped running and cautiously approached. I managed to confirm the source of the sound after moving across the road, which heavily bent to the left. It was about 150 meters ahead. The carriage had fallen over, and 2 humanoids were being assaulted by over 15 creatures resembling really large wolves. I quickly zoomed in on them. Those are. What appeared before me were life forms, who looked no different from your average human. It was a man and a woman, each wielding swords. They were fighting while covering each other with the carriage to their backs. A number of people and horses were lying prone on the ground all around them. Damn. The moment I tried to brandish my rifle, 2 of the wolves simultaneously attacked the pair. Nanam promptly replied. Already expecting their quick response, I immediately began pulling the trigger. Pulse laser shots burst forth from the pulse rifle. The shots scattered in order not to hit the humans. All the wolves were downed instantly. However, the 2 humans were already on the verge of collapsing. Damn it. I started running toward them with my nanum-reinforced legs. I saw how bad they'd had it when I closed in on them. There were 10 people in total. 8 men and 2 women. Each of them was wearing things resembling medieval armor. Apart from the 2 who fought until they fell down earlier, all the others had their throats badly mangled and were undoubtedly dead. I hurriedly went towards the 2 who have already fully collapsed. The middle-aged man was still barely breathing, but his throat was also similarly mangled. A large amount of blood was spilling out from his wounds. It should be too late for him. The young woman's throat wasn't bitten, but her left hand was ripped off from the elbow down, and her right foot, just above the ankle, was also missing. She was bleeding profusely and had lost consciousness. The man tried to lean on the carriage in order to support himself up. Then, our eyes met. The man kept his gaze at me for a few seconds, turned it towards the woman and once again brought it back towards me. When I nodded in acknowledgement of his implied request to take care of the young woman, he slowly closed his eyes and stopped breathing. I immediately proceeded to aid the young woman. No, instead of calling her a young woman, a young girl would seem more appropriate. I'm guessing her age to be about 16 or 17. She was practically covered in blood. But this was no time for dawdling about. I immediately did as instructed. So that's really the case. It was a surprising discovery, but basing solely on her appearance, it wasn't all that strange a conclusion. Something. What something should I use? When I tried to look around, I noticed a dead horse with a leather mask fastened on its mouth. A long leather strap was attached to it, so I secured it with my knife. It was probably used to control the horse. I tightly bound the area 3 centimeters above where her foot was severed. I also did so for her arm. Cut my wrist. This guy can be quite harsh sometimes. How do I actually make her drink up though? I can't waste my precious nanums. That's it. I remembered the makeshift cups I created out of the damaged PET bottles. Let's pour some blood into this and then have her drink from it. I brought out said cup, placed it at the ready, psyched myself up and put my arm over it. Foo tilde you. I kinda resent the fact that my electromagnetic blade knife cuts so damn well. The blood vessels were suddenly highlighted in green and the incision point was indicated by a red line. Couldn't you have done this for me sooner? I really was about to cut my wrist, without any sort of damn guide just now, you know. It was kinda scary, so I decided to cut myself slowly. Ugh. Huh? It doesn't hurt. Damn you. You're doing this on purpose, right? The blood started accumulating inside the cup. Oh, that's quite a lot. Hey, aren't we done yet? The moment I had this thought, the blood flow stopped. The gathered blood looks to be about 100 cubic centimeters. You can even do that kind of thing. That's amazing, man. I lifted up the upper body of the girl and opened her mouth. Can she really drink this? I slowly poured the blood into her now open mouth. The blood in the cup drained out little by little. I see. I poured the blood evenly on her open wounds. So it's really that kind of method, huh? I took the pill case from my backpack and poured out 10 tablets. I directly swallowed 2 of them. But how exactly would I make her ingest these? Okay, I get it. I put 8 tablets inside the mouth of the young girl. These tablets contained a concentrated amount of rare metals. It was a collection of valuable materials necessary for replenishing nanoms. If someone without any nanoms within his or her body were to ingest these, they would be no better than poison. However, on a body infused with nanoms, the said nanoms would immediately secure the metals before they could be absorbed by the body directly, and would use them in order to replicate themselves. Usually, nanoms are able to break down and convert rare metals and turn them into other nanom copies in a matter of a few short moments. Well, it does look pretty nasty, with the bones sticking out and all. Damn, you sure work fast. I quickly took out my electromagnetic blade knife. In order to make some clean-looking wounds, I'll have to start cutting a few centimeters above the base of the original injury points. The electromagnetic blade knife flashed and quickly made vertical cuts above the original bases of the wounds. There was only a little blood that trickled out before the bleeding stopped, but it was still quite a curious experience. I just hope it won't appear in my dreams or anything. Well, that's certainly true. Problem is, I don't have some. Looks like I need to search their belongings. I looked around the area once more and managed to notice something just now. There was a small clearing on the side of the road nearby. Was it a resting spot? Yeah, seems like it. There's some bonfire remains there. Some smoke was still billowing out of it. There was a U-shaped hitching fence present, and the horses died around it. So that's it. I've managed to piece together their situation when they were attacked. They were in the middle of a break and may have planned to stay in this place for a while after considering the late hour when they arrived. They secured their horses to the hitching fence, lit a bonfire and were in the middle of resting when the wolf pack suddenly attacked. The 2 horses tied to the carriage were attacked as well, and the carriage was overturned when they thrashed about in panic. The other horses were tied to the fence, so they couldn't run away and died. The humans were killed off one by one until only 2 remained in the end. It was something like that, I guess. Maybe there's something which could be used as a bandage inside the carriage. I jumped on top of the overturned carriage and peeked inside, but there was nothing resembling any sort of luggage within. Apparently, all their luggage was loaded on top of the ceiling. There were 4 large cases made of leather scattered about nearby. For the time being, I carried all the cases and brought them near the girl. There were no openings for keys and they were simply bound by leather belts, so I opened them straight away without much fuss. Clothes, huh? There seems to be a lot of male clothing. I could just cut them up and use these, but with a group of this number, there should be some actual bandages present. There's also some women's clothing. There are some items resembling dresses. Could be hers. Oh? I think I got a hit. There were various things like liquids stored in small bottles, and some dried medicinal herbs inside. Here we go. These are definitely bandages. There were 3 rolls of thin white cloth. When I picked them up and examined them, I discovered that they really were simply long strips of thin cloth. They had no elasticity, but they were relatively clean. Oh yeah, that's right. Her blood has long stopped flowing out from her open wounds. I cut the strips off with my knife. Then, a fourth of the virtual window displayed by Nanum showed illustrations about the proper way to use and wrap bandages around a foot. Let's see here. First, let's do this, then do that, and finally do this. And we're done. Not bad. Not bad at all, me. Fu tilde, I'm finally done. I sat down and caught my breath. After giving it another look, I noticed that the place near the bonfire presented a more open space. I better move the girl there. I can't just leave her in a place filled with corpses after all. I spread out a blanket over the spot and carried the girl there. It was already evening, so we'll have to stay here for the time being. Yeah, guess so, huh? If that's the case, then it would be better to clean this place up. It's not a good thing to spend more than a day or 2 in a place littered with corpses. Guess I'm pulling an all-nighter. Let's light a bonfire first. It should brighten this place up and serve to ward off animals as well. Since the bonfire that was made prior wasn't completely extinguished, I just added more firewood to it in order to reignite it. I should also light one up on the opposite side of the clearing. I took some of the already burning firewood and arranged them over there to make another bonfire. Next would be the corpses. When I examined the wolf corpses, I confirmed just how big they were. They should be over 2 meters long from the base of the head to the tip of the tail. There were 35 wolf corpses, all in all. I killed 15 of them, so I guess the rest were done in by the late armed group. But the price they paid for these kills was exceedingly great. I thought of enhancing my strength and throwing these guys over the mountain valley, but when I got a better look at them, they seemed pretty heavy. They should weigh more than 150 kilograms by my estimate. Let's just drag them and drop them down the valley then. The slope was pretty steep and the bodies rolled in an interesting way. All right, let's keep at it. I managed to find the girl's severed left arm and right foot while in the middle of cleaning up. They looked pretty messed up. Should I keep them? Oh, and I should remove the ruined boot as well. Next would be the human corpses. I can't possibly throw them inside the valley as well, so I'll have to bury them. But I had no digging tools with me. Is there something like a shovel in the luggage? It's already gotten quite dark, but I could see just fine thanks to Nanum. It won't work in total darkness, but since I was under the illumination of the bonfires, I had no trouble seeing at night. I immediately found a shovel as soon as I started my search. It was installed at the back of the carriage. Guess it was part of their supplies. Let's gather those corpses first. I couldn't just drag them either, so I resorted to carrying them one by one. The burial spot I chose was on the opposite side of the clearing where the girl was recovering. When I lined the corpses up, I noticed one particular detail. Each of them wore things resembling protectors on their arms and legs, but the girl I managed to save didn't. Why is that? But well, the wolves probably went for their throats instead, because they had these equipped though. Digging graves for all these people seemed like a real chore. Let's put some back into it. After 2 hours passed since I started digging the graves, Nanam suddenly declared, "I've managed to regain consciousness. But I'm absolutely clueless about my current situation. It's nighttime already. But earlier, didn't we all?" I snapped wide awake. That's right. We were attacked by a pack of greyhounds. Everyone else was defeated one by one, and only I and Captain Antes remained fighting. And even my left arm and my right foot were. I raised my left arm and found everything below the elbow was missing. I looked at my right foot next. And sure enough, everything below the shin was also gone. Ah! I was on the verge of crying, but I held the tears off. Did Captain Antes treat me? Strangely, I don't seem to be in pain at all. Perhaps Fowl managed to survive. But I seem to remember her being brought down by a greyhound in the earlier battle. When I looked around my surroundings, I caught a glimpse of an unfamiliar man walking towards me. 2. I sighed in relief when I saw the girl wake up, cry out and then finally manage to suppress her urge to panic. She seems to be quite the level-headed young girl. I gradually approached her. "Hi there. Good evening. You're not feeling any pain, are you?" I casually greeted her. She won't understand what I'm saying anyway. The important point was to keep talking. I'll have to make Nanam compile and analyze the local languages soon. 2. I didn't understand the words the man was saying. His appearance was also quite strange. His clothes were entirely pitch black, and some parts were oddly smooth. When I managed to get a closer look, I noticed that his outfit was not separated into a top and bottom piece. Just how exactly did he put it on, I wonder? Was it directly sewn over him? There were parts of it that shone in a strange luster under the light from the bonfires. Was he a traveling minstrel? No, that does not seem to be the case. He looked quite young. About 20 years old perhaps. Just who are you? What did you say just now? 2. So you're not in any pain. That's good. Tonight was definitely a great tragedy. But don't feel discouraged. There are both good things and bad things in life. Some good things will surely happen to you next after all of this has passed. I gave her some appropriate sounding life advice. 2. I thought I managed to mishear him earlier, but it truly seems that the man was speaking in an entirely different language. But what does this mean? As far as my knowledge went, no foreign country should be unfamiliar with the language I am speaking. Did he come from a country that was completely unknown to us? Did you come to aid me, good sir? But just where is everyone else? 2. Oh yeah, Are you hungry, by the way? I have some food and water here. I took a pet bottle and some rations out of my backpack and showed them to her. 2. As I thought. This man seems unable to understand the words I'm saying as well. He showed me some items, which looked like a transparent glass bottle and a square silvery box. I have never seen such crystal clear glass before. I was honestly quite parched, but now is not the time for quenching my thirst. Where is everyone? When I scanned the surroundings once more, I managed to see the figures of my companions seemingly asleep on the other side of the clearing. Ah? So everyone really was. See them. I want to see them. Cleria attempted to crawl towards her fallen comrades. But the strange man stood up and made a gesture, which seemingly bade her to stop. Whoa there. Thought this would happen. I immediately stopped her. If her actions ended up opening her wounds, my hard work from earlier would be for nothing. Okay then. Let's try out some charades. 2. The man began to move strangely. He slightly stretched out both of his arms, sat up, walked 3 steps in the direction of my comrades, stopped and turned only his head back towards me. While I remained petrified due to confusion, he went back to his earlier position and repeated those strange actions. He remained silent all the while. Was he trying to tell me he'd help carry me over to them? I dislike the thought of being touched by an unknown man, but I truly have no other choice. I nodded my head in agreement. 2. All right. I got through to her. There's nothing impossible if you just try, huh? But this made me feel like I'm really playing a game of charades, and I did it while staying whisper quiet. There wasn't any particular rule saying I had to stay silent or anything. It's a bit embarrassing. 2. The man approached me and held me up. It's my first time getting this close to a man not a part of my family. It made me slightly nervous. We started walking toward my comrades. Oh, everyone. All of them had their throats mangled badly. It's just like what I saw during the battle. And even Captain Antes was. Everyone was laid out on the ground with their arms crossed in front of their chests. It seems that this man had treated all of them with appropriate respect. He proceeded to guide me near each of them. Lina, Jaimin, Arrow, Antero, Mies, Merca, Orvo, Fal and Captain Antes. They were all people who have served me since I was but a child. Fal was even a childhood friend of mine. My tears finally overflow from my eyes. I think I cried for at least 5 minutes. The man then brought me back to the spot where a blanket was laid out and laid me back down. 2. Fu tilde you. I really have no idea what to do when a girl starts crying like that. Guess she really was quite shook up by the death of her companions. Yeah, I'm quite familiar with that feeling too. Well then, I should get back to working on their grave. Guess I'll have to explain it to her somehow as well. 2. The man brought forth a shovel and started gesturing around once again. He mimicked using the shovel to dig the ground and burying something afterward. He remained completely silent this time as well. I managed to understand him right away. He surely means to give everyone a proper burial. I nodded in assent. The man went to work. Straight away. Please hold for a few moments. so it's unfortunate that I am unable to offer any help, but I too wish to send them off if possible." The man gave me a stern look, seemingly saying not to delay him, as he was about to send my companions off. Like I said, I also want to bid them a final farewell. The man repeatedly pointed back towards me, which seemed to say it was my turn to get my meaning across with gestures. "I see, so we would not be able to understand each other without using such motions. This is a bit troublesome." I proceeded to point towards everyone and then pointed back towards me. And then I repeated such actions. The man made an expression that seemed to imply his understanding and nodded to me. I managed to get through to him. He seems to be a fairly smart man. The man carried me up again and started walking back to where my comrades were. He looked at me, seemingly curious about what exactly I would do. I also gazed back at the man, curious about where exactly he would allow me to send them off. We spent some time in utter silence. Then the man ended up bringing me back to my previous spot. It was no good. This man didn't understand me at all. Well, come to think of it, expecting to have him understand with just those simple gestures may have been too much. I thought for a moment and pointed to the shovel placed at the side. I then gestured towards the man. He picked the shovel up. I gestured towards the man once more and imitated the action of digging with the shovel. It was quite difficult to show it with only one hand. The man began to dig again, while still remaining confused. Afterward, I pointed toward myself and widened my eye with my fingers. "How about this?" The man's expression lit up and made a gesture of agreement by forming a circle with his index finger and thumb while nodding. "It looks like I did it this time." After thinking for a moment, the man began to gather up the trunk cases, which were formerly loaded on top of the carriage, and brought them near the burial spot. He stacked 3 of them on top of each other, and then had me sit on them. He began digging once more. He'd already managed to dig up about a third of a hole that could fit everyone inside. I solemnly observed the proceedings whilst gazing at everyone's faces. Tears fell from my eyes once again. After about an hour, a hole deep and big enough to fit everyone in it was finally done. The man had actually dug away for close to 3 hours. I am truly humbled by this. He then carefully lowered everyone inside. The man seemingly remembered something and went back to get them. What he brought were apparently my severed limbs. The boot has been removed. It feels quite complicated to look at my own severed limbs like this. The man gestured to put them inside the grave as well. I nodded. Everyone may depart more peacefully if these parts of me were to accompany them. The man gestured to ask if it was all right to start filling the hole back up. I gestured to indicate that I wished to see the inside of the grave as he did so. I could not properly see it from my current position. The man understood immediately. He carried me up again and brought me to a spot where I could see inside the grave clearly. "Everyone has served me well for all this time. Your unwavering loyalty is this Cleria's lifelong pride. Please rest easy. Farewell." I called out to the man afterward, and he nodded back. It took another hour for him to fill the grave back up with soil. Afterward, the man brought me back on top of the blanket. I truly need to give him my deepest thanks for what he's done. I sat up and directly faced him. I cannot find the words to suitably express the depths of my gratitude for your aid in this occasion. You had saved my life and allowed my comrades to depart with dignity. These are things I treat as truly worthy of recognition. Thank you. This favor I shall certainly return to you manifold. I swear upon the holy name of the goddess Ruminas to reciprocate this grace without fail. I brought forth my magic energy and swore in the name of the goddess Ruminas. My body glowed as a sign of recognition from the goddess. Yes. I cannot allow myself to fall just yet. 2. Fu tilde you. I'm beat. I'm starving as well. I don't think I can get up anymore. I kept running around all over the place and even ended up doing some civil engineering work. I thought about butchering and having one of the horses for dinner earlier, but now's not the time to be concerned about something like that. But I really wanted to try some horse meat. I finished the burial and brought the girl back on top of the blanket. While I was preoccupied with thinking about how to invite her to have a meal, she gazed at me looking all serious and sat straight up afterward. She began talking. A solemn aura radiated from her as she spouted long, formal-sounding lines. When she finished speaking and closed her eyes, her body suddenly glowed. I was surprised that even Nanam couldn't identify that phenomenon. Guess I'll just have to ask her directly after I gain the ability to communicate properly. Oh well. Let's get to eating. Bet she's starving too. I took out a PET bottle and 2 portions of emergency rations. I checked out the labels first. I think girls like sweet things more, so this one seems good. The emergency rations came in 2 flavors, sweet and salty. I broke quite a sweat earlier, so salt is my pick. I poured water into a makeshift cup and handed it to her. She chugged it away with tremendous momentum. I took the cup from her and refilled it. This time, she just took small sips. She seems to be examining the cup intently. I also took a big swig out of my own cup since I was hella thirsty. I have to procure some water nearby soon. Well then, let's have some food next. I gave her the emergency ration. She gave a curious look at the ration, but didn't do anything else. Well duh. Must because I'm dead tired. I took back the ration, tore open the packaging and handed it back to her. After gazing at it for a few moments, she took a small bite. Afterward, she shoved the rest of it down like there was no tomorrow. Guess she hasn't eaten anything this tasty before. Poor thing. She seemed the youngest among her late comrades, so she was probably worked hard by the rest of the group. I also started eating. This thing's tasty all right, but it felt lacking somehow. 2. I'm exhausted. Rather, it's quite the mystery that a person who just had her limbs torn from her would be this vigorous in the first place. This man was surely a distinguished user of healing magic. It seemed he was quite surprised when I invoked the name of the goddess earlier. But since he couldn't understand my words, his reaction was understandable. I'm sure he's curious about the contents of the oath I swore under the purview of the goddess. It was rare for most people to witness someone swearing an oath to the goddess after all. Because of my position, I've had several opportunities to witness such a sight already. But people not belonging to nobility might find such a thing unusual. Afterward, the man took out that crystal-clear glass bottle from earlier. He also took out a similarly clear glass cup and poured water into it. He then handed it over to me. I was utterly parched, so I drank away with abandon. When I finished it, he refilled the cup right away. When I calmed down somewhat, I noticed just how strange this crystal-clear glass-like vessel was. It was quite thin, and after I finished drinking its contents, it was so light that I felt like I wasn't holding on to anything at all. And its surface was perfectly even, considering its complex make. Just how much gold would someone pay in order to obtain something this exquisite? While I was preoccupied with my thoughts, the man handed over the silvery box next. How curious. Judging from its weight, it doesn't seem to be made out of metal. I cannot fathom its make at all. After seeing that I was hesitant, the man prompted me to hand it back. He peeled away the metallic surface as though performing a trick, exposing the contents within. He then gave it back to me. I was utterly amazed by what I witnessed once more. The thing I thought to be a metallic box was, in truth, something wrapped in an extremely thin metallic sheet. The metallic sheet was peeled away so easily. The man gestured for me to eat it. This was food. When I tried to bring it near my mouth, an enticing fragrance wafted out from it. I bit off a small piece near the corner. Sweet. Was this a type of dessert? It had a mellow sweetness and moist texture. I ended up practically devouring it. I've eaten all of it up already. This was the first time I've had such a delectable dessert. The man had also finished eating his portion, pointed towards himself, and uttered, "Alan." He paused a little and continued, "Alan Corinth." Was he saying his own name? Speaking of which, I haven't introduced myself properly either, haven't I? I tried and pointed towards him while saying Alan. I paused for a moment as well and finished by saying Alan Corinth. The man nodded happily. I should introduce myself as well. I pointed at my person and said Cleria. I paused once more and gave my full name soon after. Cleria Starvine. The man pointed back towards me and said Cleria. Cleria Starvine. He repeatedly said my name several times. He seemed to be practicing. While he was preoccupied with saying my name, I focused on the man's expression. Even after hearing the surname Starvine, this man didn't show any particular reaction. As I thought, this man. No, Alan Corinth didn't seem to be a local from anywhere in the surrounding areas. But even so, was he actually a noble? I find it hard to imagine that items such as those glass containers, and that delicious dessert were possessed by a mere commoner. I was quite familiar with all of the main noble houses of this kingdom, and of the neighboring kingdoms as well. But I have never heard of a noble house called Corinth. The moment I felt full, a sudden bout of sleepiness overcame me. It might be due to my being relieved, because Alan Corinth may possibly be of noble station. 2. I was glad that my attempt for a self-introduction went quite well. The name Cleria Starvine kinda sounds pretty cool, huh? I wonder what her profession was. Maybe she's some kind of soldier, because she's armed with a sword and wore some armor. She's of the same trade as me then. We may get to understand each other better, because we shared some things in common. There were still a lot of things I wanted to ask, but Cleria seemed pretty sleepy already. She gestured as much, softly uttered some words and plopped herself right down on the blanket. As for me, I was dead tired, but the night was still young and there was something I really needed to finish no matter what. No, we might not even have until morning. Basic ones would do. They don't have to be for regular use. But I want them to be able to allow her to walk for at least several minutes at a time. But I don't want something unstable or breaks down quickly. You can use only the materials available to us here. Start designing them immediately. While I was doing as requested, I recalled the shocking truth I just managed to realize earlier. Cleria just drank a lot of water. She'd probably have to relieve herself later. She couldn't walk. I don't think a girl lacking a foot and an arm would be able to go about her business all that well. That means I'd have to help her out. A frightening future potentially awaited me. I must somehow avoid this tragedy in the making. My battle has just begun. The prosthetic was finally complete. I was worried about the possibility of Cleria suddenly waking up in the middle of the night in order to relieve herself, so I worked on them while under pressure all the while. Honestly, though, I wouldn't have been able to properly build it if I didn't manage to find a toolbox that seemed to be for the maintenance of the carriage. Nah, this prosthetic couldn't have been completed if any of the important materials were missing. I was actually quite confident about this DIY project. Though I said DIY, it was Nanam that actually designed the thing and guided me with extreme precision in order to make it. Its overall design was quite simple and the main materials used were as follows: the suspension of the carriage, a large-sized and slender metallic cup, a horse harness and a small-sized jack, which was taken from the toolbox I found earlier. The suspension was shaped like the character to facilitate better shock absorption, with its tips extending out in order for it to be attached to the carriage. It wouldn't have been possible if it was shaped any differently. Also, the suspension's hardness was quite impressive. It had a miraculous balance between toughness and flexibility. Nanam couldn't identify the exact material, but it wasn't made of wood or metal. It was apparently a body part of some unknown creature. It was very durable and suited to be used as suspension. The metal cup resembled the shape of a champagne glass, and its diameter gradually widened from the bottom up to the rim. Its mouth was as wide as Cleria's calf. I confirmed the thickness of Cleria's calf by zooming in on it from a distance. I cut off the unnecessary parts, namely the stem and foot, and welded it onto the jack with my laser gun. The angle of attachment was the key. Cleria's body weight calculated by Nanam along with the weight of the other components would be supported by the suspension. In order to facilitate this, the shaped suspension had to be attached vertically. I carefully carved the tip of the suspension, which would be connected to the jack, into a round shape with my knife until it reached the ideal angle. Afterward, the prosthetic would be practically completed after securing the suspension to the jack. It could be equipped by using the belt of the harness in order to fix it onto Cleria's leg so it doesn't come off easily. It was designed with the image of Cleria's leg being inserted into the receptacle and securing it with the leather belt. Its main feature was the function of freely adjusting its height through the use of the jack. Man, I'm pooped. It's already near dawn. While I was worrying about whether or not to wake Cleria up, she ended up coming to by herself. From now onwards, it's a race against time. 2. When I woke up in the morning, I noticed that Alan Corinth No, Lord Corinth was already awake. He hurriedly approached me and eagerly showed me something peculiar. It seemed to have part of the ceremonial cup attached to it, but I don't recognize the rest of its make. He was trying to explain its use to me by talking, but I naturally could not understand a word. I turned numb from shock when he suddenly carried me up. I was then made to sit on the stacked-up trunk cases nearby. He wrapped the remainder of my severed leg with some freshly prepared strips of cloth. I didn't understand what he meant to accomplish by doing so. Soon afterward, he brought the odd contraption from before and tried to place my leg inside it. He tilted his neck and wound another layer of cloth around my leg, while muttering something before placing it inside the contraption once more. He seemed satisfied this time around and started securing the part, just underneath my knee, onto the contraption with a leather belt. After finishing his work, he took my right hand and made a gesture inviting me to stand up. It can't be. He grabbed both my shoulders and forcibly made me stand up. My heart fiercely throbbed inside my chest. No, it can't possibly be. After looking over my entire body, he made me sit down again. He started adjusting the contraption once more while muttering. My heartbeat continued racing intensely. I still could not believe what was happening before me. He forcibly brought me up once more and observed me. He seemed satisfied. He carefully pulled me by the shoulders. I slowly walked forward with uneasy steps. I wasn't used to the unfamiliar sensation, but Lord Corinth supported me. I couldn't help but make more defined steps. I took a step. And another. And another. The sensation I felt when I put my weight against the contraption was somewhat strange. I took a step. Then another. And another once more. This can't be happening. It feels like I'm inside a dream. I took a step. And another. And another. Lord Corinth let go of my shoulders and stood right next to me. I took a step. And another. And another. It felt like I was being led to dance. I took a step. And another. And another. Lord Corinth completely let go of my hand. He then walked beside me. I took a step. And another. And another. Lord Corinth stopped in place. I started to walk around Lord Corinth on my own. I took a step. And another. And another. Before I knew it, I was shedding tears. I took a step. And another. And another. Ahaha. This is so amazing, Lord Corinth. I laughed and cried at the same time. I took a step. And another. And another. I had already managed to walk on my own for about 10 minutes. I wobbled a little when I finally stopped in place, but I managed to balance myself in the end. Lord Corinth. This is truly wonderful. I still cannot believe you were able to accomplish such a thing. Of course, Sir Corinth still could not understand my words. But the fact that I was happy reached him, and he gave me a gentle smile in return. I wanted to convey my feelings of joy to him even more, but I suddenly felt an undeniable urge. If I did not respond, I would not be able to continue walking freely just like earlier. But how exactly should I convey it to him? Val had always remained by my side until yesterday, so I had always counted on her whenever this happened. I truly could not convey it to anyone else but her. I thought for a moment and pointed towards the forest nearby. I pointed towards myself next and pointed towards the forest once again. Will he understand my meaning? Lord Corinth nodded and made a circle with his index finger and thumb. After gesturing for me to wait, he took up what seemed to be a wooden spear and rushed toward the forest with tremendous momentum. After about 3 or 4 minutes, he returned and nodded towards me once more while making the same circle shape with his fingers. He had surely gone to scout out the area earlier. Lord Corinth then sat down and expressed his firm will to stay put. I took a small toiletry bag with me and went towards the forest while blushing furiously. 2. I accomplished it with an excellent A++ evaluation, of course. 2. After I relieved myself, I went back to where Lord Corinth was. He conveyed his intention to sleep soon after. As I thought, this sort of contraption surely could not be made in just a few minutes. He had most likely made this for my sake all night. I am really humbled by this fact. He would have slept directly on the ground, so I urged him to sleep on the blanket instead. It was one of Lord Corinth's belongings to start with. This man was truly an exemplary noble. He was prudent, kind-hearted, possessed a keen intellect and was powerful. Yes, he was powerful. I was still in the midst of confusion yesterday, so I failed to notice, but I and Captain Antes were certainly surrounded by over 10 greyhounds before we lost consciousness. He had most likely defeated all of them by himself. I lost both my arm and my foot yesterday, due to my own carelessness. I had removed my vambraces and greaves in order to relieve myself, just like earlier yesterday. I paid for that dearly by losing my limbs. But still, if I had vambraces and greaves equipped, my throat would have been mangled just like everyone else's. But thinking about such things now was no use. I couldn't sleep well last night even after lying down. I thought about many things. The deaths of my comrades, the sacrifices I had made until now, anxiety about the undertaking I must fulfill no matter the cost, the loss of my limbs and my future as a disabled person. I had finally found myself all alone. Who would willingly follow someone who could not even walk? I thought about such things and was not able to sleep. However, with this new leg, I could still move forward. I might be disabled, but I could still do my best. Yesterday was the worst day of my entire life. However, I was blessed to be able to encounter Lord Corinth as well. Now I owed Lord Corinth yet another favor. Even though I have not managed to thank him with anything in return yet. I need to resume my journey immediately once Lord Corinth wakes up. I shall prepare for that accordingly. Would Lord Corinth be willing to accompany me, I wonder? 2. Fu tilde. I honestly felt I haven't gotten enough sleep yet, but I asked Nanam to wake me up at noon. Let's just get up. There are still lots of things I needed to do. Cleria was currently in deep thought in front of a small mountain of luggage. Looks like she was sorting out her things. I would have wanted her to rest up more though. I'll take a look as well. The 4 leather cases were wide open, and she was busy selecting some items from within them. When she noticed I was standing on the side, she hurriedly closed the case with women's clothing in it. Oh come on. I didn't really intend to check those out, you know. Honest. Cleria started another gesture game with me after seemingly remembering something. Looks like she wanted to tell me about that something. She took up her sword without removing it from its scabbard and swung it towards the direction the carriage traveled from yesterday. She then pointed at herself. What? Was she being pursued? Was Cleria actually a criminal? Like a bandit? There's also the possibility of a war going on. I made an OK sign with my fingers. Just how many pursuers were there? Now it was my turn to gesture around. I tried to put up my fingers one by one until I get to the correct number, but Cleria immediately stopped me. Yeah, I get it. A group composed of 10 people was forced to flee after all. It would be safe to assume that the pursuers were more than 10. Cleria made a gesture that conveyed she didn't have any idea about their numbers. Nanam actually made a rare complaint. I know. Guess it's all my fault it turned out like this, huh? I gave an OK sign with my fingers to Cleria. Next up would be how much time we had before they catch up. I pointed towards the sun and slowly moved my outstretched finger towards the western direction. Wouldn't it seem weird if I started talking while doing this stuff all of a sudden? Cleria again gestured that she didn't know. I gave an OK sign once more. Well, she was still busy sorting out her luggage earlier, so I don't think those guys would be coming anytime soon at least. Guess the gist was, I'm being chased, but I don't know how many pursuers there are, nor when exactly they would catch up. I actually wanted to stay here for one more day, and then set off the day after, but it looks like I need to change the schedule now. We need to leave as soon as we can, considering the state of Cleria's foot. We need to sort out the things we need to take with us immediately. Was there something like a bag somewhere nearby? I immediately saw objects highlighted in red when I scanned around. Oh, so there they are. A large shoulder-carried bag was lying around near the bonfire remains. It even looked like a bag used to store food. Speaking of which, I hadn't managed to find any food supplies in the carriage yesterday, and found it a little strange. Jackpot. It even contained salt. And this was probably pepper. I found myself some treasures right off the bat. The bag next to it contained cooking implements. There was a frying pan, a saucepan, knives, forks and a lot more. This was also a jackpot. The other bag contained a blanket. I don't really need this one since mine's better. But I'll keep it just in case. Other than those, there was a fancy-looking shoulder bag near the fallen carriage. What's in this? There's not much content. When I inspected it more closely, I found clothing articles that looked like women's underwear neatly stacked inside it. I turned it over to Cleria, who was busy sorting out her stuff. When she saw the contents, Cleria glared daggers at me. No. I really didn't mean to, okay. Hey, there were also bags hanging on both sides of the horse saddles. I see. Their personal belongings were probably stuffed inside them. Let's check out their contents. We finally managed to sort everything out after an hour or so. I touched the medical pill-like object I found yesterday and had Nanam analyze it. I gathered everything I managed to find and had Cleria take a look at them. I gestured at her in order to ask for permission to put the supplies inside the traveling bags. Cleria nodded in agreement. One bag was highlighted in blue and the necessary supplies were highlighted in red. I put them inside one after the other. And I'm done. Now for the next one. I ended up packing one backpack and 3 bags worth of supplies. Each of them was practically bursting at the seams. I had my hands full with the backpack, 2 bags, 2 blanket rolls, and my rifle. Guess I'd have to throw the bags away if we encounter a situation where I would need to use my rifle. I just noticed it earlier, but the work suit I hung on my backpack in order to let it dry was now nowhere to be found. It must have fallen off while I was running yesterday. I don't really feel like going to the trouble of picking it up. Cleria carried the smallest shoulder bag among the 3. She also kept the bag with her personal effects inside with her. 2. I managed to convey to Lord Corinth the fact that I was being pursued by using gestures. I could not afford to keep this matter to myself. This road would probably be thoroughly scouted before long. There were not many avenues of escape available to us. I was actually afraid to divulge this matter to Lord Corinth. There was no reason for Lord Corinth, who had no particularly deep relations with me, to involve himself in my troubles. I would not blame him even if he were to express the desire to part ways. However, even though Lord Corinth seemed startled at first, he did not look to be particularly flustered about it at all. Have I not managed to convey my matters to him properly? No, it did not seem to be the case. Lord Corinth began to busy himself soon afterward. He seemed to be checking the supplies. He walked around the area and gathered all the supplies near the center of the clearing. He looked satisfied after gathering most of them and gestured towards me. He was probably asking if it was all right to put the things inside some bags. When I nodded in agreement, he immediately started packing the gathered supplies inside the bags. He seemed to have picked some things to pack in advance. All the things he put in were the ones that seemed immediately useful to us. Even I was convinced with his selection. I also tried to pick things out earlier, but all of them seemed important, so I could not decide on which to prioritize in the end. Eventually, Lord Corinth filled out his personal bag, which resembled those used by traveling merchants, and 3 shoulder bags with supplies. Lord Corinth nodded towards his personal bag, and 2 other large bags, and then pointed towards himself. He then nodded towards the smallest bag and pointed towards me. I was convinced for the first time that Lord Corinth actually intended to accompany me. Lord Corinth truly was an exemplary nobleman. I felt so ashamed that I suspected otherwise. While he was organizing the luggage, I noticed that Lord Corinth did not possess a sword. Perhaps he lost his when he fought off the greyhounds yesterday. I gathered all the swords of my comrades earlier, but I could not possibly bring all of them with me. I decided to let Lord Corinth choose a sword from among them instead. I led Lord Corinth to the spot where I had gathered the swords and gestured for him to take one. 2. Cleria pulled me towards one spot where a number of swords were neatly lined up. They were probably the weapons of her late companions. She seemed to mean for me to choose one. If I continue to use the pulse rifle and laser, their energy packs would eventually run out sooner or later. Once that happens, they'd be nothing but useless baggage. It would be nice to have an alternative weapon. A sword, huh? How nostalgic. Naturally, this was my first time seeing a real sword. But I've seen plenty in a VR game. A VR game that prominently featured swords and stuff was all the rage in the school I attended from junior high to high school. I was also quite addicted to it back then. The name of that game was really straightforward. Its title was Swordsman. It was your standard RPG, but it also featured a robust PvP mode. I was completely smitten with this game for 4 straight years. But the fad soon faded, and I ended up quitting as well. But before I quit, I participated in a world tournament for the game, which was held on my home planet, and ended up placing 9th overall in the final rankings. It ended up getting shown on the local news through the net, and I was regarded as a sort of hero by the boys in my school. It might be too late to say this after spending a great deal of time and lunch money playing it, but just why did I devote so much to such a pointless pastime? But well, considering my current situation, my lunch money may have ended up being well spent after all. I picked a sword that somewhat resembled the one I used in the game, and took a bit of distance from Clearia. Now, how'd this go again? Let's try to remember that tournament. I was just a 14-year-old brat back then. At the time, it really felt like joining that tournament was the climax of my life. I logged in day after day, and even installed and used an overclocking module to play, though it was eventually banned. I tried to remember what it felt like during my gaming days and slowly brandished the sword. Now I remember. Those days filled with burning passion. The longer I swung the sword, the more I remembered. Yeah, I managed to recall it now. The finishing move I used during that tournament. Corinth-style swordsmanship final secret technique, Meteor Stream. It was a blazing 24-hit combo with extreme offensive power. But now that I think about it, just what kind of naming sense did I have back then? And by the way, there's absolutely nothing remotely resembling meteors present in the move. My body steadily warmed up after swinging the sword for some time. I transmitted my mental images to Nanam and tried out all the basic combos used in the game. Yeah, my body's moving well. So it was like this. The more I repeated the combos, the better I moved. Maybe it's due to muscle memory or something. Let's try out some more advanced ones then. Man, this is actually fun. I gradually solidified the image of Meteor Stream inside my head. Now I truly remember. This was a move I practiced thousands of times. Tens of thousands of times. When the image became complete, I performed the true Meteor Stream. 2. Lord Corinth remained in a daze for a few moments, but when he saw the swords, the look in his eyes changed. He went straight for Captain Anti's sword. I was impressed by Lord Corinth's sharp sense of judgment. Captain Anti's sword seemed normal, but it was actually a magic sword of considerable quality. I knew this because I was the one who personally bestowed it upon the captain, but to think there was someone who could see its true value at first glance. Lord Corinth took some distance from me, got into a stance and pulled the sword from its sheath. I could now finally witness Lord Corinth's prowess with the sword. At first, he just brandished the sword normally. The swings seemed simply to be for loosening his shoulders. The sword swings gradually go faster and faster. He then performed a succession of attacks. Such sharp swordsmanship. Following that, he showed a series of unfamiliar sword techniques one after another. The techniques do not seem to be from any sword school I was familiar with. They would be hard to deal with for those who encounter these techniques for the first time. 5 attacks in rapid succession. Ah! What impressive moves! Lord Corinth suddenly paused. He closed his eyes and seemed to be sharpening his concentration. I was sure he was preparing to unleash a powerful technique. Lord Corinth slowly opened his eyes. His entire aura turned exceedingly sharp. He merely stood in place with sword in hand, but just seeing him like that was somehow terrifying. What impressive sword spirit! In the next instant, the technique was unleashed. It was an extremely fast-paced succession of attacks. And it did not comprise of only sword strokes. It also integrated martial techniques, such as kicking and foot swiping. The successive attacks continued without pause. The last move was an exceedingly sharp, practically invisible downward strike. I was stunned to silence. It was a sword technique akin to that of a beautiful and elegant dance. It was an element not present in any of the well-known sword schools. No one who encounters it for the first time would be able to block that sword. Yes, no matter how masterful the opposing swordsman was. It was an impressive sword technique that thoroughly made me think as such. This sword technique was definitely Lord Corinth's trump card. And he openly allowed me to observe his technique. For any swordsman, their strongest move equates to their very lives. Unless it was between a master and student, or lord and retainer, it was something not to be revealed to just anyone. Once it was shown, it meant that the swordsman entrusted the other person with his or her life. My chest burned hot from the trust Lord Corinth bestowed upon me. It cannot be said that I and Lord Corinth had a relationship built on mutual trust. But if a person does not learn to believe, then nothing would begin. This was Lord Corinth's way of declaring that he would put his complete faith in me from now on. I shall also put my faith in Lord Corinth. All right. I've finished packing all our things and got all my weapons in order. Nanam wanted to check Cleria's injuries, so I had to make her know. I explained my intentions through gestures like usual and had her sit down. I removed the prosthetic, unwound the cloth wrap, and peeled off the bandages. The wound already had a thin layer of skin covering it. The bones aren't sticking out like before, but I could still faintly make them out under the uneven skin layer. The part of the injury in immediate contact with the prosthetic was a bit swollen. It seems I need to learn how to wrap cloth around injuries better. That's right, huh? You can't regenerate body parts without enough materials to work with after all. That's fairly fast enough. Let's prioritize regenerating her leg then. Normally, even if a person consumes a lot of food, the amount of nutrients he or she can absorb in a single meal is limited, and most of the excess nutrients are expelled out from the body instead. That's because the human body is designed not to take in nutrients more than necessary to achieve normal bodily functions. However, if Nanam interferes with this natural process, it can make it possible to absorb the maximum amount of nutrients and store them in the body. Utilizing said nutrients, it would allow Nanam to perform body regeneration by causing accelerated cell division. That's a broad way of putting things. But I guess it can't be helped, because we don't know much about this planet's food items. Looks like I need to search and gather some food again. But I don't think there are any mock potato patches in this particular area. Wait up. If her foot starts gradually regenerating, then she won't be able to use the current prosthetic leg anymore. The disastrous flag I avoided is rearing its ugly head again. Nanam displayed the prosthetic leg design on a virtual window. The design was far too basic, only leaving the suspension to support Cleria's entire weight after fixing it via the belt. It doesn't look like it would be able to support her weight properly and would disrupt her center of gravity. She won't be able to walk all that much with this. But she could at least hop around a bit with it. In any case, I've managed to avoid the worst-case scenario once more. In other words, Cleria won't be able to walk properly for quite some time until her leg gets fully regenerated. Alright, that's good. I don't know how far we needed to travel, but it may be necessary to prepare another camp depending on the number of days it would take to reach our target destination. I'll confirm it with Cleria later. Let's put the prosthetic leg back on her for now. I rewrapped her leg with the bandages and cloth strips. I rewrapped the cloth and put the prosthetic on. I wasn't satisfied with the result, so I removed them and redid the process. I went at it for several tries, until I finally got the most optimal wrapping method down pat. Next would be her arm. It was also covered in a thin layer of skin, like with her leg. There doesn't seem to be any problems. 2. After displaying his skill with the sword, Lord Corinth lowered the sword and bowed his head. He seemed to be thanking me. I'm glad. I thought I might have been too presumptuous earlier, but it doesn't seem to be the case. I think that with Lord Corinth's exalted status, he would be able to obtain as many high-quality swords as he wanted easily. But he may not be carrying one, because of some sort of circumstance. He seems to want me to show him my wounds next. He may be intending to diagnose them. I also wanted to see what had become of my severed arm and leg. When the prosthetic and the bandages were removed, what appeared before me was a miserable stump for a leg. I was nearly in tears. Lord Corinth displayed a troubled looking face as he observed my cut-off leg. Was it actually worse than expected? He wrapped the bandages and put the prosthetic back on again, but ended up redoing it many times. He finally seemed satisfied, after a few tries, and gestured for me to try and stand up. Ah, how wonderful! It was a bit painful earlier whenever I took a step. I thought it was natural because my foot had been severed, but I do not feel any sort of pain right now. It seems I would be able to step more firmly with it from now on. He took a look at my arm next. It had also turned into a stump. When I took a look at it myself, I saw that a thin layer of skin had formed over the wound instead of a scab. Impossible. I got these injuries just yesterday, and now they were already covered with skin. Did Lord Corinth use something more than just simple healing magic? Lord Corinth was not particularly surprised when he saw the state of my arm and rewrapped the bandages like normal. Next, he pointed towards the ground and drew a circle on it. He then pointed to the road ahead and drew a line from the circle towards the road. He drew an X mark after reaching a certain point. He placed 2 fingers above the line and moved them as if mimicking a person walking. Is he asking me how long it would take to reach our destination? It should take about 20 days, so I raised all 5 of my fingers in front of him and thrust them out 4 times. Have I transmitted it properly? Lord Corinth again preoccupied himself with thinking. Was something the matter? He seems to be inviting me for a meal. He peeled another one of those metal-wrapped sweets and handed it over to me. It truly was delicious. It was quite immodest of me, but I still ended up finishing it all in mere moments. We were finally set for departure. I put on my greave and vambrace. Unfortunately, the ones for my severed limbs could only be discarded. When Lord Corinth saw me attempting to do so, he stopped me and started putting them inside a bag. I gestured several times that they were not necessary, but he still insisted on making space for them in his luggage. It would have been better to make the bags as light as possible. Well, they are certainly made of mithril, so we could attempt to sell them in the future. But with only part of a pair, I do not think they would amount to much. We carried our baggage and finally set off. 2. Time to leave. There's a lot of things to consider, but for now, it's dangerous to remain here. Let's leave for the time being. Cleria was wistfully stroking one of the dead horses. Maybe it was her personal steed. Man, it's good I didn't end up butchering it for meat last night. I put the sword on my waist and shouldered my backpack. I pulled the straps of the shoulder bags over my head and made it so that I would be carrying one on each side. I had the blankets sit on top of my backpack. My rifle was slung on my shoulder. There was quite a lot of stuff, but I could still handle them easily. Cleria also equipped her sword on her waist and slung her shoulder bag on one side. The bag looked quite loaded, but it shouldn't be that heavy. All right. I'll properly learn the language on the way as well. I'm getting a bit tired of gesturing around. I'll need to search for foodstuffs as well. I pointed at myself and said Alan. Then I pointed at Cleria and said her name. Next, I pointed at the fallen carriage and waited for Cleria to speak. She answered with Cantor. So a carriage was called Cantor, huh? I'll have Nanam record it. Once it records enough language data, I'll have it update the current language database. I pointed out to a lot of things one after another. It may inconvenience Cleria a bit, but I'll still need to have her do it for me. The only edible ones I'm familiar with were just the mock potatoes, the unnamed herb, and those leafy salad use veggies. The entire area was suddenly dyed red. Looks like I had to do it manually after all. I reminded Nanam to only inform me if we managed to find something edible, and started to persistently rub leaves once again. But now that I think about it, I still haven't managed to ask about her age. Would asking her directly seems a bit rude. Nah, she still looks quite young, so I don't think she'll mind too much. I pointed at myself and raised 2 fingers, immediately followed by all 5. I then turned to Cleria and raised 1 finger on my left hand. When she saw my gesture, her expression turned a bit sad for some reason. Oops, looks like it's a miss. So she's at least older than 15. When I counted to 7 while still keeping 1 finger raised, she nodded happily. So she's 17 years old, huh? She's still just a teenager, as expected. Oh? I found some mock potatoes. Let's collect them. I put the mock potatoes on a small bag I kept empty in order to hold my collected food items. This was something Cleria needed. Let's gather a bit more. It seems to be called poto, when I inquired Cleria about its name. Yeah. It's been a while since I found something new. I finally found something, after needing plants for 2 hours straight. It was a plant mainly consisting of a white-colored stem. When I tried a bite, a crunchy texture spread throughout my mouth. It should be delicious if properly cooked. I'll collect some of this too. It would be a waste if we couldn't finish all these, but we could just throw the excess ones away later. Looks like Cleria doesn't know its name. Maybe it was just a minor wild vegetable. It was now about 3 in the afternoon. It can't be helped because we started traveling late, but we'll have to make camp after 2 more hours. 2. Suddenly, something jumped out in front of the road. It was a fang boar like the one I encountered previously. However, it seemed about 2 sizes smaller than the boar I killed. I stopped myself from taking aim with the rifle. This seemed like a good opportunity, so let's defeat it with a sword. The energy reserves of my laser gun and rifle were limited. They could be considered my trump cards, so I want to reserve them as much as possible. This boar looked like the first monster I killed in the RPG I played before. It was perfect for practice. If things got too close for comfort, I could still just finish it off with a rifle. I pulled out my sword and took a stance. Somehow, the boar seems a bit too excited. It repeatedly pawed the ground. Do I have enough time to put down my luggage? When I thought that, the boar suddenly lunged forward. I didn't panic and slashed its side right, after avoiding its charge, just like how I did it in the game. That's it. It's over just like that. Did it make for good practice? Then, 3 wolves appeared from the side of the road next. This fang boar was apparently chased out to this place by these 3. Nice timing. I happen to be lacking some practice opponents, guys. I've already locked onto the wolves. If it looked dangerous, I just needed to put the rifle up and pull the trigger. I need to make sure they don't get to Cleria, who's out back. The wolves seemed to be angry that their prey was taken from them. They attacked immediately. They jumped up and pounced from above, but that was a bad move. I slipped from the side like with the wild boar from earlier, and slashed out with my sword. One wolf's head easily got separated from its neck and flew out. This sword sure cuts well. Seems the other 2 learned from the earlier clash, and attacked me simultaneously from both sides. Naive. I threw my electromagnetic blade knife at the one on the left before it managed to jump. The knife accurately pierced the wolf's throat. Throwing techniques are actually one of my strongest suits. I cut the head of the one on the right, just like earlier. I then finished off the wolf who got struck with my knife. That was honestly a bit of a letdown. Well, even if they are wolves, they're nothing more than big canines. When I turned to Cleria to see how she's doing, I saw her gazing at me with a blank expression. Oh well. Anyways, I got us some meat. And the timing's perfect too. I didn't have that many items packed inside the food bag. The only meat we had was of the dried variety. I wanted Cleria to eat some proper meat for her recovery after all. Let's butcher these guys right away. I had Nanam indicate the parts one should secure. I dismantled them according to Nanam's instructions. Oops. Can this tendon really be eaten? I see. Let's secure a lot then. Oh boy, even the innards, huh? Alright. We now have both meat and vegetables. We've also got cooking tools and salt. It's a feast tonight. We started walking again, after I collected the meat. I threw bodies of the defeated wolves below the valley. I finally spotted a river after some time. Been a while since I saw one. Hey, that's it. How about camping near the water? Maybe we could even bathe in it. Looks like we could easily go down the river. And it was relatively shallow, so there should be no dangerous creatures within it. I made my intentions known to Cleria by gesturing. It looks like she's in high spirits as well. I wonder why. Although we already went down to the river, I made sure to choose a spot where we couldn't be seen from the road. This should be a nice spot. The shore was nice and wide. There was also a small pool formed due to the flow of the river being slow. I made a simple stove using some stones I picked up from nearby. I also had to gather some firewood. Cleria also helped by taking out ingredients with her only remaining hand.